then right in the middle of Trafalgar Square will be a 16-foot statue of Sadiq Khan.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, much bigger than he actually is.
Who wants
Tell
it?
you what,
Who wants to see
he'll
that?
be on the fourth plinth. They are never, ever, ever going to do a statue on the fourth plinth that anyone's ever going to like or want, that's for sure. Ian, what's coming up on your show?
We're talking shoplifting, the story you've covered. I know it's an absolute scandal. They're just the numbers we know of as well.
Exactly, they're the ones that actually
it's likely to be twice that, I'm sure.
And the rest.
We'll talk to one notable victim of this.
Okay, brilliant. Ian Collins up next. Big thanks to Philip Ingram. I'm done for the day. Back with you next week on Monday. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. How are you doing? Thank you to Julia. It is 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. Welcome to the home of common sense. I know Julia was talking about this Mike 2 attacks on shop staff hit a record high. 2,000 incidents reported daily. More than 55,000 thefts also recorded. Not every year, not every month, every day. What is behind the explosion in retail crime? We'll look at that in more detail in just a couple of moments. Also this afternoon, taxpayers are funding new clothes and shoes for illegal channel migrants at a cost of £3,000 a day. It's all great. It's a bonanza for things that happen in a curious way every day. There's another one. £4 million over the past 3 years has been spent on sandals. Man alive. And rescuers say they're believed to be no survivors after a jet carrying 64 people collided mid-air with a helicopter before crashing into a river in Washington, D.C. The rescue mission continues, but there is a very real sense. There's only one way this story is going to end, and the likelihood of surviving, finding anybody surviving, is pretty thin. Details on that too. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. I keep hearing, and social media is like it's either It's your best friend or your worst enemy. But it's like it's like an abusive partner. You keep going back for a bit more. Chock full of more misinformation than you can shake a stick at. I mean, it is absolutely round. I know these are just people's opinions and stuff. It's not the news, so to speak, although some people like to say this is the news. But if you dig deep, every now and again, you will find some interesting threads and some reliable bits of information, and you'll also find people's opinions that just make you sit up and go, are you serious? And I was looking at a discussion unfold, and this is why you shouldn't spend your life on social media, because you will on social media, because you will die at some point. You will die of either going completely insane, or you'll be so outraged by the daft, stupid arguments you've got involved with somebody you don't know, and you're not being paid for your time, but for some reason you decided to dedicate 32 hours a week rowing with one person over something, to the point you never slept. And you often see this on things like Twitter and previously, like Facebook's still there. A few people, your nan might use it, but it's still around. You see an argument that is happening, I don't know, 7 in the evening. For some reason, it's caught your attention. And then the next morning, when you look at it, it's still going on. They return to it at 7 in the morning. Why would you bother? Why do people get so animated about stuff? And usually neither party knows what they're talking about. And the reason I mention this is absolutely relevant to the shoplifting story. When you look at the amount that is being 55,000 incidents a day, 2,000 violent and abusive incidents a day. We're talking about the cost of shoplifting going from 1.8 billion to 2.2 billion. And I saw a thread unravel on social media where someone said, just very glibly, it's because of the cost of living crisis. I mean, firstly, get in the bin, you half-wit. It's the cost of living. Is that you nick a Prada handbag because of the cost of living crisis? Or a caseload of vodka and a swift bottle of Lightning Jacks because of the cost of living? Really? Oh, is that what it's about? Because you can't feed your kids. So let's go and half-inch some Mulberry goods down there in New Bond Street or elsewhere. Really? The cost of living? Nonsense. So whenever there is a narrative that really deserves some anger, there is always some dodgepot out there who'll go, I think you'll find it's because people can't afford to eat. I don't buy that for 1 second. That is fake news right there. But you will see that view proliferated all over social media at different times and in varying forms. So shop thefts and attacks on shop staff have hit the highest levels on record. On record. The levels of lawlessness are absolutely huge. And I'm talking to you in particular, if you work in this industry. How many times, and again, something that I don't think used to happen, but no, even in shops that have security guards, why would you pay the security guards? They don't stop the people nicking the stuff. How many more videos? You've all seen them. Again, go back to social media, look on YouTube, security staff doing nothing while somebody robs the store. You've got people doing their walking around with a basket, a trolley, doing their shopping. They're clearly about to nick it. They don't even do a runner, they do a walker. They nick it, they lob the stuff in the trolley and they walk out. And the bloke goes, excuse me, and that's it. That's the end of the confrontation. Because they're told by their bosses, don't get involved. You might get badly hurt. And we've got to protect you. Don't have the security. What's the security person doing there then? It's an absolute nonsense. If you work in that industry, in retail or in a connected area, just describe for me, if you would, how this feels. Like being there, literally on the shop floor, whether you're in one of the big shops. I saw a fella nick a sandwich out of Costa yesterday. In fact, it was an old lady in front of me. I saw this bloke kind of just dithering by the food bit. It was only a small Costa. And he was just kind of standing there. And I thought, is he in the queue? Is he not in the queue? But he was by the food. And then he just walked out. And I thought, did he do something then? And then the old lady said, that man just nicked a sandwich. And they just went, oh. No, I mean, no one followed him out. It was in a railway station. They could have probably clocked him and at least got their sarnie back. But it's broad daylight stuff. And if you're in that place, is it so common that you just simply don't have to worry about it. And the figures are getting worse. This is the greatest high of incidents since 2001. Helen Dickinson, Chief Executive of the British Retail Consortium, will be speaking to those guys later, says this is spiralling out of control. It's despite businesses paying a record, and this is interesting, a record 1.8 billion on prevention, things like CCTV, security guards, body-worn cameras and stuff like that. Funny who you see with a body-worn... The first time I saw a parking attendant with a body-worn camera, I thought he wasn't a real parking attendant. I thought, who has that right in the middle of his chest? Sternum cam. They're filming every altercation just for his own safety. 61% of retailers say police response to calls for help has been poor or very poor. We'll speak to one woman in around about 20 minutes with the most unbelievable story of a lack of response. It's extraordinary. Retailers are reporting unprecedented levels of violence towards their staff, with the number of incidents involving a weapon more than doubling to 70 a day. 70 people a day. Seriously, 490 people a week are in an incident involving a weapon because they work in a shop and they're trying to stop somebody nicking something. So what is behind this? I don't even think it's just the fact that you might struggle to get a police officer out. I mean, I know they cut the numbers of police, but they put quite a lot of numbers back in the last few years. I don't think it's so bad that no one can attend a shoplifting incident. So speak to me as somebody who works in retail, as somebody who used to work in retail. Maybe you got the hell out of Dodge because of stories such as this. Whether it's about the violence and abuse of shop workers or just the theft itself, what kind of scale is it on? And what sort of response did you get when you tried to kind of, report it? You think that's quite a serious thing. A shoplifting incident. The first time I ever saw that was a kid. Our Price Records. Remember Our Price? Somebody nicking I was about to say a CD. It was probably a vinyl. I don't know. Either way, shoving it in their jacket, in the inside of their jacket, and then just quietly walking out. I thought I'd just witnessed a murder. I mean, it was absolutely shocking to me. That's the taboo nature that people, the reaction we used to have. So there's sort of knock-on effect of how... So even those of us that don't go around nicking stuff, or I did accidentally once steal a pepper from a supermarket, but that's a whole other story. Those of us that don't used to be really shocked. And I suppose part of that shock as a law-abiding citizen was, disappointment and a bit of outrage. Wow. Now... you don't really think much about it. That's the first time I've mentioned the fella nicking the sarnie out of Costa since it happened. I haven't mentioned it to anybody. Didn't mention it at home, didn't mention it at work. I think a few years ago you'd have gone to work and said, guess what I just saw? I only nicked a cheese and ham toastie out of Costa. I think that would be a bit of a story. It wouldn't be a greatest anecdote, but it'd be something you'd mention. This stuff is very common. If you have been there on the receiving end, if you know what this feels like, the violence or just the theft, if you own the store in particular, then there's real problems there. 0344 499 1000. Candice Holdsworth is with us, writer and broadcaster, to get our teeth into the big stories of the day. Candice, afternoon to you.
Afternoon.
Let's just get an example then of what is happening of these shoplifting and attacks on shop workers as well. Cost to businesses are soaring. Apparently there's little faith in police action. Some are taking matters into their own hand. Let's listen to one such example. Martin Gaunt, a shop owner, speaking here on Talk.
Someone's already gone, and you're simply saying, look, there's this white fella, 5'10", with a hoodie and a carrier bag that's left my store without paying for something. You're almost wasting everybody's time because it's an impossible task to try and track that person down or do anything about it. But the problem is it's throwing the baby away with the bathwater syndrome. There are things that we can be doing that we're not doing and we should be doing. I mean, we have reduced our repeat shoplifting by probably about 90%. Purely because we've decided enough's enough and we will confront people, we will stop them.
So maybe confrontation works, but I guess for many people, Candice, it's quite a horrifying thought that there's some, 6'3" character and you're a lone shop worker on your Todd. Do you want to make that confrontation?
Yes, I mean, if I was running a shop, that'd be really difficult. I mean, I'm 5'2" and I'm not easily intimidated, but there's no way that I could physically confront a
Sure.
man, it's just impossible. It wouldn't happen. He'd laugh in my face. I just think it's awful that that people who own shops, people who start the businesses, people who make high streets so wonderful are the ones who have to bear all the risk and all the cost. And once again, it is the state utterly failing in its duty to do what we pay taxpayers' money to do, which is enforce the law.
Yep.
And I think for a lot of the reasons for this, and this is what a lot of shop owners say, is that the people doing it know that they won't face any consequences. They know that they can pretty much do it with impunity. I mean, we saw this in San Francisco. I mean, that is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever visited. But sadly, it has an open culture that kind of went too far and started enabling just blatant lawlessness on the streets. And a lot of it came from what you were talking about right at the beginning of the show, where people make excuses for these criminals. You know, they're the victims, actually, and we should feel sorry for them. And then once you have that attitude to it, where you're no longer seeing them as transgressing taboos and committing crimes, and actually they're people we should feel sorry for, then you can't enforce the law at all.
Yeah. It was certainly California, wasn't it, where they had this, you know, unless it's $2,000 or more,
yes,
we're not even going to investigate. I know that question, something similar, was put to the Mark Rowley, the head of the Met, recently. You know, I think the figure was $250 or something pounds. And he denied that. He said it doesn't happen over here, but there's clearly a problem. Whether it's because of the amount that's stolen or some other reason, that there is a big body of evidence from shopkeepers that if you are reporting shoplifting, even when you have quite a lot of very good, spectacular evidence, the best you get is a crime number.
Yes. I mean, I had something stolen a few years ago. It was my purse. And I had about £200 in there because I was just about to travel overseas. So I'd taken out lots of cash. And nothing ever came of it. You know, they just said, sorry. They had CCTV footage of them, but they said no one came forward. And that was it, you know. Just
That's
it. Sorry for you, you know.
Yeah.
My fault for not watching my personal.
Yeah, how crazy is that we should go around expecting not to be attacked or robbed? What a bunch of naive characters we really are. Another story here, taxpayers paying £3,000 a day for new clothes and shoes for Channel migrants. This is new research that has come out and revealed that the cost of clothes. We never really think about that, Lily. We know about the hotels and the mobile phones and all the rest of it, but taxpayers apparently funding new clothes for those that come over. £3,000 a day. That's an extraordinary amount of money, really. £3,000 a day just out of the public coffers for a new sweatshirt and a pair of pumps.
Can you believe it? Honestly, I mean, this is just utter profligacy. I mean, it really is. This is taxpayers' money. And, you know, I don't think these public bodies even think about it. It's just money that they hand out and they don't think where it's coming from. And it angers people when they think about things like the Latin program for state schools being cut or the advanced maths program being cut. You know, all these types of things funding the system that most people actually really disagree with. And, you know, you're rewarding people as well for breaking the law, you know, coming into the country illegally. I mean, these NGOs, these charities, the states, they are all far too generous with taxpayers' money.
Yeah, it was quite interesting when the White House did a press conference, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and there were some very worthy journalists there saying to the Trump's new press woman, you know, are you saying some of these people that you've deported haven't got a criminal record? And she said, no, but they were here illegally. That in itself is a criminal act. And there was but no criminal record. I said, no, you don't understand. They were here illegally. That is a criminal act in itself. Some people can't quite get their head around that. I thought it was common sense. We'll talk more about Trump and illegal immigration in a few months. The latest from Washington as well. What Scots think their country was a victim to. It's an extraordinary story. All of that and more coming up. Candice Holdsworth is with us. You're listening to Talk. It's 18 minutes after 1.
killed growth. This is all panic, isn't it? This is a good case to sack the Chancellor.
No, complete rubbish. Come on, look, you saw today a strong Chancellor in control of the agenda for this country.
Really? Or a panicking Chancellor pivoting and trying to U-turn?
Panicking. You're creating a fiction, Harry.
Would you like the job if she...
It was a great speech today, setting out this government's agenda, why the plan for change is working, the plan for change that the British people voted for, with a historic landslide for a Labour government. We're getting on with the job of the change that we promised in delivering, and that is a great thing for the country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
20 past 1 on Talk. Candice Holdsworth is with us, looking at the big stories. Tragedy over the United States this morning. We hear officials believe there are no survivors after an American airline passenger jet colliding with a helicopter above Washington, D.C. This was in the early hours of the morning. Let's have a listen to John Donnelly, Washington, D.C.'s Fire and Emergency Medical Services Chief.
We are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident. And we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter.
Tragic stuff, Candice. Accidents do happen from time to time. This seems rather extraordinary that a military helicopter, I know lots of people are making this point, why was a military helicopter in that space? I'm sure this will all come out in the fullness of time, but tragedy nonetheless.
Because it's everyone's worst nightmare, thankfully rare. I mean, most people can be fully confident when they travel by airplane. It is one of the safest ways you can travel. Stuff like this weighs very heavily when you see it, but it will not happen because most of the time the regulations governing air travel are brilliant. For me, I could only speculate, like you were saying, why were they traveling in the same airspace? Was this a failing of air traffic control or something else? We don't know. I'm sure that will emerge.
Indeed. We'll watch with interest. And, of course, full updates here on Talk. Let's talk about President Donald Trump planning to house criminal illegal aliens, that's a quote, at Guantanamo Bay's Migration Detention Centre. You can only imagine the good and the great, discombobulating when they heard this said. This is Donald Trump, essentially, an extension of what he said he would do. He was going to get strict on this stuff. If you're not meant to be here, then we will deport you. And in the meantime, if there's questions to be asked, we may well imprison you, and Guantanamo Bay might be the place.
By the time the sun sets tomorrow evening, the invasion of our borders will have come to a halt, and all the illegal border trespassers will in some form or another be on their way back home.
So there it is, Candice. I mean, a man of his word, even if you hate the bloke, a man of his word.
Yes, he's getting tough. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. I didn't realise the clip was coming. Yes, he's getting tough, and he said he's getting tough. He named this after Laken Riley, the Laken Riley Act, the woman who was killed by an illegal immigrant from Venezuela while she was just out jogging. He's going to send the most violent, dangerous criminals who are there illegally to Guantanamo Bay. And the fact of the matter is that's how it should always be. That woman should have been able to go out safely that morning on a jog and come home. She should not have been murdered. That person had been arrested numerous times, and there should be absolutely no excuse for violent criminals roaming the streets. I just can't believe we've gotten to this point where people are sort of feeling sorry for people who break the law.
Indeed. And it's a bit like the kind of, announcing there's two genders is somehow somehow controversial, and suggesting people who have just broken into a country shouldn't be there. That's apparently controversial as well. And it's in stark contrast with a bit of breaking news that just came out. People smuggling gangs, this is the British government here, people smuggling gangs could be charged with a new criminal offence of endangering lives at sea under a new plan. Really? Is that all you've got, Keir? Seriously? Again, it's smashing the gangs. Gangs he can't find, so he can't smash. And even if he did find them, people have been trying to smash them for years. That's as far as it goes. You see what Donald Trump's doing, you see what Keir Starmer's doing.
Well, there was some evidence before he got rid of the Rwanda that people were starting to be deterred by it. They were going via Ireland instead of coming here. People work according to very basic incentives, and if you understand them, then you can shape their behavior. And knowing that you're going to get sent to Guantanamo Bay is going to be a really powerful deterrent. And it's the same here. You have to remove the demand side of the equation. That's what you have to do. You can't just focus on the supply side. But I just feel like that there is this attitude that they are afforded special sympathy. And I just wonder, the human rights circles from which Keir Starmer has emerged, it is considered taboo to in any way hold these people accountable. You can only ever speak of them in sympathetic terms. I mean, I'm not for mistreating people in any way, but when you constrain the debate so much, then you can't solve the problem.
Yeah, spot on. And a final one here. 40% of Scots see that Scotland was part of a British Empire subject rather than part of it. They were the victims of it. Among SNB supporters, 60% believe that Scotland was a subject country. I mean, this is extraordinary. This is demonstrably not true, by the way. There's no truth in this at all. But so many people, certainly of a political persuasion, I mentioned the SNP there, have got themselves into believing that Scotland was some kind of colony like Jamaica or India, that the British came along and took I mean, it's some absolute bonkers stuff. But those SNP guys believe it.
They do. They've just spread such nonsense. I mean, this is like really buying into victim culture. I mean, to a point where it's absolutely ridiculous. These ideas as well, they're so deeply damaging. I mean, I think that they really alienate people from the culture that they're born into.
Yep.
They will struggle to relate to other cultures. And, we think how this transmits to people who've moved here from overseas. We talk about, failing to integrate people. Well, how can you integrate into a culture that just says is so self-loathing and sort of tells itself that it's uniquely evil in the world? The fact of the matter is Scotland it was part of the Enlightenment. I mean, it moved society forward.
Yeah.
Yes, it got involved in colonialism and there were many evils associated with that. But I just dislike the way that the SNP is rewriting history in this way. I mean, it's pathetic. I'm sorry. It's just pathetic. That is the word.
It is, yeah. It's just a bit mad, We're victims too. No, you're not. You trousered the cash like anybody else did back in the day. Candice, thank you as ever. Candice Holsworth, the writer and broadcaster with us on the show. Thank you to her. Over to you. 03444991000. What is behind the explosion in retail crime? I think that there's an obvious answer about, if police aren't going to show up, more people are going to commit crime because they think it's worth the risk. I think there's something more going on. I think there is a sort of recalibration of what people think they can get away with, and not just not get caught, but what they think it's okay to do. We've kind of almost rewired the human condition in that one cohort of characters, the kind of bottom of the barrel people of the gene pool that will nick your phone, that will do horrible things. They'd snatch your dog and sell it on eBay. They're those kind of people, and they would rob shops. If you've been on the receiving end, what is behind the explosion in retail crime? We've got 3 voices coming in on this, including one who was a victim of the most extraordinary and audacious act of theft from her businesses, and what happened when she rang the police. Find out next on Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. So let's get into this story then. British Retail Consortium warning shoplifting is out of control. More than 20 million incidents. 20 million incidents in the 12 months to August, and that violence against shop workers is at an all-time high. We're talking about 2,000 a day. Violence. In some cases, offenders are openly clearing shelves of items in full view of customers and shop workers. We've all seen those clips on social media. We'll speak to one victim of this and the audacious nature of what happened to her and the response that she didn't get when trying to report it. We'll also talk to a police and crime commissioner on this point too. But first, Tom Holder, spokesperson for British Retail Consortium. Tom, good afternoon to you. I mean, the figures speak for themselves, I guess.
Yeah, they really do. Over 2,000 incidents of violence or abuse every single day against hardworking retail staff. And this is simply unacceptable. These are, often teenagers, often people coming back to the workforce after kids. Retail attracts people because of its flexible nature, and to see them have to be subjected to this kind of, often racial abuse or other abuses is utterly disgusting, and we really need to see the police put an end to it.
What has happened? Well, was there a tipping point when, this? I mean, clearly people have always tried to nick stuff. We all know that, but there seems to be. I'm resisting the word epidemic, but when you look at these numbers, it feels a bit like that, and we're talking about violence as well as theft, and usually both. I mean, the figures are extraordinary. The almost the lack or the fear of getting caught, I suppose, is the game changer here that we've seen in recent years. The brazen way with which people steal.
I think you're right. I think there's a perception that people can get away with it, and that's emboldened many people to do it more. I think the tipping point seemed to be in the pandemic, where the numbers shot up, but they never really came back down again. And, it is hard to ask why, but one thing we have seen is an increasing rise in organised crime. Groups that will, come in, balaclavas, they know exactly where the high-value items are. They go in, they steal, they'll clear shelves of high-value items, go out, and then hours later or the next day, they're hitting the next shop in the next town over.
Yeah. What's the answer to this? I mean, people often talk about, well, the police don't turn up, so it's because of that. Is there something else going on, do you sense, Tom?
We certainly would like to see the police response improve. Around 60% of our members describe the police response as poor or very poor. And as a result, many of these crimes don't get reported because they simply don't believe there'll be any action taken. So it feels like a waste of time for the retailer. But we will need, I think, more money towards community policing, and for police to be going into retail shops to make sure they're attending. The other thing when it comes to the violence and abuse is that we really need this standalone offence for assaulting or abusing a retail worker, similar to what exists in Scotland. The government has said it will bring it in, as did the previous administration. We need to see that in, and we need to see it covering all frontline staff, including delivery drivers, who can also be on the sort of sharp end of some really horrible abuse.
Tom, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Tom Holder, spokesperson for the British Retail Consortium. Let's speak with Paige Menges, owner of luxury resale fashion store Phoenix Style. Good afternoon to you, Paige.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us. Well, you are one such person. You've been on the receiving end of this, and to say it was audacious it hardly begins to cover what happened to you. Tell us more.
So I have two stores, one in Cobham and one in Wimbledon, and they were targeted by the same men. They came in armed with tools, cut through our security wires, because all the bags are attached with security wires. They knew what they were doing, what they were looking for. We have, security alarms. We've got panic buttons. We pressed those. We've got amazing CCTV, which you can see. And yet the police just didn't come. They came in broad daylight, my staff were terrified. You could see their faces. They weren't even covering their faces. They, didn't even have balaclavas on. But yet the police didn't turn up. They just gave us a reference number.
It is extraordinary because when you see what happened, I mean, you've got some high value goods there. What sort of amount of money's worth did you lose on that day?
So on this occasion, we lost 15,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's for a small independent business. It's a fortune. But I just sort of feel it feels like these criminals just can act without fear of consequence.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? When you look at the footage, it's not as if you've got some sort of grainy shot of some fella, with a hood on at the light of a silvery moon sneaking in at 3 a.m. This is broad daylight. You can see the faces quite clearly. The crime was high value. I mean, all theft is bad regardless, but nonetheless. Again, in your mind, you would imagine that within an hour there was a kind of, your shop would have been cordoned off with police tape, and those people with the forensic boys and girls would have been in there, carrying all sorts of things to find out who they were. And all you got was a crime number out of this.
Exactly. I mean, in the store in Wimbledon, we had witnesses. We had a photograph of the getaway car that they used. They came in without wearing gloves, so there was opportunity to take fingerprints. We just had everything available.
Am I right in saying you also had a panic button that went straight to the police station as well?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And that didn't work.
So did they not get the message, or do they not respond to the message?
We're still trying to find out, but it did go through, but I don't know why they didn't respond.
Have you been able to since get any kind of response? Because your story did get a little bit of profile.
So I went onto social media and we got about 400,000 views and people contacting us. And then eventually 2 days later, the Surrey police turned up to take a statement. And then the Mail on Sunday did a piece. And then I went on to LBC and spoke to the commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley. And then we did get a response. And I believe one perpetrator has been
arrested.
Sentenced.
Yeah.
Arrested.
Well, indeed. And let's hope that is pursued. In terms of, I mean, something you touched on, Paige, at the beginning was the fear of the staff. I mean, when somebody walks in and starts, robbing the place, that in itself is a violent assault, even if you're not physically assaulted. The fear of seeing a load of strangers coming in forcefully with tools to cut stuff from the security tags and wires, I mean, that's a terrifying place to be if you're in the same room.
It's traumatic. It's traumatizing for my staff, and I don't want to have to put them in that sort of position. I always do tell them that they should not approach these people because we just don't know. But it is just, it's frightening in the whole nature of the fact that they're coming in with tools. I don't know what to say.
So you, in terms of what that means for you, does your insurance go up now? Is it all of that you've got? Have you got to up your security? You already had what sounds like pretty good security. You've got the cameras there with full-blown pictures of these people. There's no doubt of who they are. If anybody knows them, they would recognise them. But what more can you do in terms of a retailer?
So we are going to have to strengthen our security. At the moment, I've got a security guard working with us who comes and helps the girls at various times of the day. We're also going to be putting in secure doors, secure cabinets. All these things are going to have to happen. Yeah. And it's another further expense for retailers that are already
absolutely right. So when you saw those numbers, Paige, 20 million incidents in 12 months, there's violence involved in some of these, 2,000 attacks a day. I mean, it's costing, a lot of money. We're in the billions here collectively. I'm assuming, based on your own experience, none of that actually surprises you anymore.
No.
It's sad, isn't it? Because when we were kids, if somebody saw that story, you'd go, wow, that'd be one of the biggest stories you'd read all year, and yet here it is. It's sort of, people gloss over it and go, oh, it's just another one of those incidents. Well, listen, I wish you luck. Stay safe and good luck to all your staff as well, Paige. Thank you for speaking with us. Paige Menges, who's the owner of luxury resale fashion stores called Phoenix Style. And if you didn't clock the pictures there, these are full-blown glossy images of blokes' faces as they nick her stuff. wasn't dark, it was broad daylight, and in they walked, as audacious as you like, and robbed the place to the tune of thousands. Let's speak with Katie Bourne, Sussex Police and Crime Commissioner and APCC lead for business crime. Good afternoon to you, Katie. Nice to have you with us. It's a story you will be very familiar with. Is there a tipping point here when this used to be a really serious crime that shocked us all, to the point where we just sort of gloss over it and say, oh, it's another shoplifting incident?
Unfortunately, I think it has got that way, and it should never have got this bad. And we understand there's a lot of pull and requirement on police time, but I think you overlook shoplifting or shop theft at your peril, because it is a gateway crime, and it is often where a lot of criminals begin their craft. It's how they learn. And if you can stop this stuff early, you can actually prevent a lot of more serious crime later on. Yeah, indeed. We've heard about police not attending incidents. I mean, as a police and crime commissioner, what is your take on that? Because that does, you know, I've always had very sympathetic views towards the police. I think they get a torrid time. They're up against it. There's budget considerations. I don't believe for one second the average cop is sitting around the corner in a police car going, I don't think I'll bother with that one. Clearly, that's not the case. What has gone wrong there? I think the demand on police time has really grown so much in recent years. Certainly, I've been doing this job for 12 years and I've seen a big change. So if you look at some of the more complex crimes like serious sexual offences and rape, when I was first elected in 2012, on average in Sussex, we recorded 3 every day. Now we're averaging 6 records of rape every day, and these are the most serious offences, and they are very complex and they take a lot of time to investigate. And I think over the years that complexity has grown so much that police have actually almost looked the other way with what they've seen as lower level type crimes. But of course we know from everything we've seen that shop theft is not low level, because the impact it has, you know, if there's violence and abuse, is massive. And brought it home for me several years ago when I was talking to one of my local shopkeepers. He'd been assaulted. He'd had someone come in trying to steal some alcohol, and his 9-year-old daughter came downstairs to talk to him. And it suddenly occurred to me, you know, this isn't just his place of work. No. This is his home as well, and this has got to stop. And when we look at, you know, across the board, I don't know what the specific figures are for Sussex and your neck of the woods, but overall, 2,000 incidents of violent and abusive. This doesn't include the actual theft, just the violent and abusive incidents. 2,000 a day in the last year. I mean, this is out of control. When you start to get to the incidents of actual theft, we're up to 55,000 a day. Yeah, and really just probably scratching the surface on this as well, because I think it hasn't had the attention that it's needed for so long that it's got to a point now where criminals feel quite emboldened. And, you know, the whole kamikaze stuff that you've been talking about, but it's because they can get away with it. Now, I don't think this is all down to the police. You know, this is also the retailers themselves recognise that there's a lot of work they have to do too. And I've been working quite hard with some of the country's top retailers to see if we can crack down on the organised crime gangs that are driving quite a lot of this criminality. But I think it's also for local police forces to take this seriously too. You know, they all have offender strategies on how they will deal with prolific offenders. So I'm asking my colleagues, my police and crime commissioner colleagues, does your prolific offender strategy cover shoplifting as well? Because we have prolific shoplifters in our communities too. And are they really tackling those people and going after them? Because where it works, certainly in Sussex, this is what has been happening. We see a massive reduction in these crimes. So has Sussex experienced a reduction in shoplifting? Could you go that far? Yes, very much so. Very much so. Where we've had targeted sort of hotspot policing areas, and we've targeted them around retail areas where we know there's been a lot of theft and a lot of abuse and assault, we've seen a more than 60% reduction in shop theft in those areas. Wow. So we know it works. And it's just a case of keeping that focus on, you know. So my job is to make sure that my force's performance improves, and I keep a relentless focus on this area. It's in our strategic document, our police and crime plan. So the chief constable has to have due regard when she delivers policing operationally to business and retail crime. And I work really hard with my retailers every quarter we meet, we go through their local problems and we sort them out. And Sussex Police have been really proactive in this. So yes, we've seen an increase in reporting, which is brilliant because more of my retailers are coming forwards to report. But at the same time, we're also seeing an increase in the solved rates as well. So we know that we are where we're catching them. But the frustration, I suppose, for me is still that the prolific shoplifters, those individuals, aren't, when they get to court, they're still not getting sentences.
Well, nothing really happens, does it? I mean, if you and me went on the, perish the thought that we should, duo up, Katie, and start, stealing vodka out of the local co-op, but we
don't go there.
I don't think we're likely to go to jail for it, and that's the problem, because you'd think, as kids, you'd look at these kind of crimes and think, surely, you're going to get at least a few months in prison for that, but nothing seems to happen if it gets to court at all.
Well, quite. And giving somebody a fine when they're driven by a drug problem or an alcohol problem and expecting them to pay a big fine as well, they're just not going to do that. They need help and they need to change their behaviour. So what I'm really keen on, and I've called for government and I will continue to say this, is why can't we tag our prolific shoplifters?
100%.
So instead of taking them to court, put an electronic tag on them, because you can geolocate where they are, but also you can force them into a rehabilitative program. So you can put a positive requirement that they will attend a drug or an alcohol rehabilitation program. So this is my next ask of government.
OK, Katie, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Katie Bourne is Sussex Police and Crime Commissioner. Before that, you heard Paige Mengers, who's been the victim of this. You put all of that together, you look at the massive numbers right across the country. They're absolutely huge. What is behind that explosion? Is it just as simple as people thought they could get away with it? Have we rewired the morality of the nation as well? What used to be seen as, they often talk about that, don't they, in supermarkets when it comes to the, the self-service checkouts, which are obviously everywhere now, that people will, try and put a different, I don't know, have to weigh your own item every now and again. They'll put it down as a pepper rather than as a turkey or whatever the heck it is, and try and get away with it. So there's a bit of that going on as well. Are we just more relaxed about people losing stuff? I mean, retailers close down. Prices go up because of shoplifting. It's also terrifying. It's also so often violent as well. Is it just a case that the old bill aren't going to show up? Is that the only reason we've got more people who feel emboldened to go out there and start trousering other people's goods? 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
For the first time in history, we're loading dangerous and illegal aliens into military aircraft and flying them back to the places from which they came. You probably read about Colombia 2 days ago. They said, no, we're not taking them. I said, we're going to take them. You're going to take them. You're going to like it, too. You're going to take them.
Oh, he's great, isn't he? You're going to take it, you're going to like it. Because he said if you don't, we're going to put so many tariffs on you, you won't know which way to turn. Brilliant.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Cedric says, bring back corporal punishment as they have in Singapore for shoplifting and petty crimes. Don't they take you down the police cells and give you a bit of a whooping with the old whip down there? I think they do. Peter says, surely these offences aren't shoplifting, but are robberies. Shoplifting always used to be carried out by people that didn't want to be seen, caught, but the offences are now blatant and have the threat of violence or real violence and damage carried out. That's robbery, not just theft. Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, you think it is. But it's the blatant nature is the bit that I think is key to the question of what is behind it. It could just be as simple as a load of criminally minded half-wits have thought the police are unlikely to come, and even if we did get caught, nothing much is going to happen. It might just be that. Or have we kind of rewired this? And if you work in the retail sector and you know what it's like to stand there and watch somebody just simply removing stuff from the shelves, I'm all ears at this end. Carl is in Solihull on this point. Carl, how are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. What about yourself?
Yeah, very good, thanks. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I've worked in retail for 40 years,
yeah.
And predominantly in the loss prevention, profit protection and security sector for the last 20.
Mm-hmm.
For the last 10 of those, I've had my own business offering a consultancy service to retailers all about this problem.
Okay.
And the key fact really is that there's no deterrent. It's a societal problem that, you know, people can get away with things, and it doesn't matter. There's very little interest in business crime from a policing point of view. They don't have the resources or the budget to support it. So the retail businesses that are left, you know, of their own accord to do what they can. My measure is very simple. That I always say there'll be 10% of people that never do anything wrong.
Sure.
Whatever opportunity in front of them, they never will. There'll be 10% of people that will do as much as they can to get away with things. And the 80% in the middle will do whatever they need to do based on their circumstances at that time. And unfortunately, the opportunities and the need that arise for that middle 80% is ever on the increase, and they know they can get away with it and nothing will happen.
Is that all it is? Is it people that previously, you know, might have just, you know, just stuck a Mars bar in their pocket and don't tend to work, they sit at home smoking whatever they smoke and do nothing all day long, have now sort of realised, actually, this is a great way to earn a living because I can flog this down the local pub, nobody cares, I'm not going to get caught, and if I do get caught, nothing's going to happen anyway.
Well, it's interesting. I always say, you know, the people that start with Mars bars are the ones that move on to razor blades and then on to, you know, baby milk and products that can get away with.
It's all high-value stuff.
Being the one, but they end up then being experts in, you know, committing refund fraud, and they're the ones that are swapping, you know, single-size curtains for king-size size and, you know, everything else they can get away with doing and committing refund fraud. And the problem is the actual value of fraud, I actually believe, is higher from an internal employee point of view than it is from an external point of view. But again,
really,
it will happen to those people either. Yeah, it's quite well known that in the industry, if you take the measures of internal fraud versus external fraud, the opportunity to increase your values, if you're a cashier working 20 hours a week and have the opportunity to start at £2 a day to £5 a day, very quickly they get confident when nothing happens and runs into the many thousands.
Sure.
But again, even when you get full admittance, full history, full recorded evidence, very little happens to those people. You can do more with organised crime, and shoplifting is less of a problem for them.
You just said that. You said something there that's probably not that relevant, but it was interesting. Single-size curtains for double-size. What's that? You mean somebody empties the packet and gets a bigger refund than what they paid?
Yeah, so there's many things that fall into that category. It can be, I'll swap the wallpaper packaging and put the barcode of the $1.99 wallpaper for the one I'm actually buying, which is £20 a roll, and I'll pay for the single-size quilt when I've actually got a queen-size quilt. There's hundreds of scams that people get up to, and then when they buy things, obviously they're refunding them and defrauding at every opportunity they can. It's a real shame, but for me, it goes back to a lack of deterrence. We advise retailers, if you can deter, then you can detect, then you can disrupt. So it's all around displacement. Do what you can as a retailer to deter, move them onto elsewhere. Unfortunately, you're looking after yourself and you're not looking after your business partners and colleagues on the high street. You're just dispersing these people.
Of course.
But it is about looking after yourself, deter, invest in good training, good quality people, protection, conflict management, resolution, and then all the bits you can from software.
Should we also be making it, a very serious crime now, so that people go to jail for a long time?
I've always believed that, but if you think, we can't even manage knife crime really well, can we? We
can't do anything about any crime, it seems. Unless you commit terrible murders, not a lot happens elsewhere.
Exactly. So it will never be on the agenda. So for me, we probably do need to do more around civil recovery and taking action around, getting our funds back, plus the cost that it actually affects to deal with these perpetrators.
Sure.
But also, then if we get funds back, let's invest in, teaching and educating the youth as they come through, so they don't move from a Mars bar to a razor blade to
a laptop, and all the rest of it. Listen, Carl, it's a very thorough call. Thank you very much indeed for that, Carl in Solihull, on retail crime. Tad in Cambridge says, I don't get criminality. My own philosophy is I would rather do a person a good turn than a bad one. Yeah, here. Criminal scum are the antitheses of that. Crime is something we can defeat, but I don't expect any criminal-loving lefty to solve it. Unfortunately, they're everywhere. So I think you're absolutely right on that. Well, you sort of need a sort of Donald Trump approach. It's now going to become the barometer of how you approach stuff, isn't it? You need a Trump approach where you go, we're not going to put up with this. I know that, was it Bill Braddon I think was head of the NYPD or somebody like that had the sort of broken window policy that if you follow up the small stuff, you eventually get the big stuff. Well, do we not just get tough on people who nick things out of shops and stores? I don't know how you would treat somebody who'd stolen a banana in comparison to somebody who'd stolen a car, for example. It's not my job to do that, but I'm sure we could get a little more robust with those that do. If you've been there and seen it, you've got the T-shirt, you've worked in retail, you've witnessed the crime, how brazen are some of these characters? What is behind the explosion in retail crime? Violence as well as theft. 0344 499 1000. We'll take some more calls on that in the next section. Right now, though, it's 2 o'clock on Talk. Let's get the latest news headlines.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. Welcome back. It's the home of common sense, everybody. Lots to get through. We are talking shoplifting, attacks on shop staff too, hitting a record high, 2,000 incidents reported daily. In terms of thefts, more than 55,000 incidents reported every single day, according to new figures. And of course, those numbers are naturally going to be higher. What about the ones that were not reported? What is the answer? What's behind the explosion in retail crime? If you've worked in it or witnessed it, then all ears at this end. Also this afternoon, Channel migrants who delay rescue until reaching British waters, putting lives at risk, could face up to 5 years in jail under Prime Minister Keir Starmer's new border security bill. Is the PM really getting tough on this, though? Or is he coming at this from completely the wrong angle? And Donald Trump has announced plans to house what he says are the worst criminal illegal aliens at a migration detention centre on the US military base in Guantanamo Bay. The man Trump is not messing around. He's keeping to his words. All the breaking news, everything you need to know right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. One here says, what is the demographic of most shoplifters? On the face of it, it seems to be similar to those committing knife crime. Can't believe that huge gangs of kids on video that you're seeing. How frightening. How the heck are we going to be able to stop shop going forward when our retailers and delivery drivers pack it in? Maybe they should all have a guard dog or two. That might sort out these types. Nothing really happens because the fella on the door is probably told by his employer that he's only there as a kind of visual warning, maybe an eyewitness, but not there to intervene. No, you need a sort of Johannesburg-style security guard from about 1986 who would probably know how to deal with a violent shoplifter. We don't really do that kind of stuff over here. Let's get a word on the big stories of the day. What's going on over there in Westminster and the like. Oscar Redrup is a former special advisor to Boris Johnson when Mr Johnson was Prime Minister. Oscar, good to have you back with us, sir.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Very good, thanks. Listen, it's rather interesting, isn't it? At the moment, we're watching this kind of compare and contrast play carry out between what the Americans are doing and what the Brits are doing. And as Donald Trump is really taking no prisoners, he's like, look, I said I'd do this, and now I'm doing it, whether it's deportations, they've happened. He had a fallout with Colombia for about 3 minutes before they realised it wasn't in their interest to fall out. Guantanamo Bay, back in business. Whereas over here, we've got a very different approach, it seems. Mr Starmer's talking about migrants who delay rescues until they reach British waters, facing 5 years in jail. He's also talking again about the people smugglers, and if we find them, they can also be charged with endangering life at sea, which seems like so far away from the real daily problem as to be almost laughable. But this is the difference in our two countries' approaches.
Yeah, I mean, here in the UK, and again, I'm not being party political, you know, it's very easy to kick the Labour government, but look, this has been a problem that attached itself to all, you know, different governments of all colours. We do triangulation here. We get worried about kind of scaring and we want to please all sections of society all the time, and we tiptoe around stuff. I think that is particularly prevalent with the way Keir Starmer does his business in government. And then you look across the Atlantic and you just see, you know, you see an administration and strong leadership that completely is double down focused on exactly the key priorities that the voters voted them in for. And we just struggle with that in this country. We struggle with the awkward conversations. We have a civil service that is often well-intentioned, I would actually say. They're not always this evil kind of sludge, or that they're often, sometimes, you know, us conservatives have kind of bashed them with at times. But it's just too flabby. It doesn't get things done. And then, you know, members of the public And the politicians forget this. Members of the public have jobs and they have quite busy jobs. And so they understand the concept of like having to do things quickly and understand priorities. And they watch their politicians kind of rock back and forth for years and, you know, kind of moving from left to right and doing nothing. And you know, I think what's going on in America in terms of the way they absolutely, you know, dodge, they're going to absolutely rip up and slim down government, you know, offer people redundancy packages, just get people out of the way. If you're not interested in furthering the mandate that we have and the country's agenda, then get out of here. Yeah. And I do think that is a real lesson we could learn from in the UK, particularly on stuff like immigration.
What was it like? I mean, you were, you know, in more meetings than you can, you know, remember with Boris Johnson when he was the Prime Minister. You and, you know, you'd have sat there with other advisors, you know, what's on the agenda today? What's our approach to this? You know, how do we tackle that? Did that come up a lot? You know, what other people might think? Was that kind of always an underpinning almost barrier to anything? We can't upset that group or that group, so we better do this just to be sure.
I mean, you can feel like, you know, number 10 can feel like a submarine almost, and you completely lose concept of what's important and priorities. You have the media, different elements of the media going after you and your agenda. You have a lot of MPs in your own party who have their own issues and their own priorities, and then, you know, opposition and, you know, strong leadership and strong government. We tried not to listen to the opposition kind of carping from the sidelines, but you can lose a sense of what's important. And, you know, in fairness, I actually think when he was at his best, Boris was so good at getting out there and spending time with the public and out on the stump. And, you know, I haven't seen Keir Starmer around a crowd of people, you know, on the hoof, you know, ad hoc, kind of actually gelling with the public. I haven't seen that once since he's been in power. So that's when Boris was at his best. Well, look, in terms of the issue of immigration specifically, I think we genuinely got really enthused by Rwanda, as in we knew that was going to be difficult, it was going to be unpalatable to a lot of people, and actually just, you know, pragmatically it was going to be difficult to implement, as I think we found out. But we felt like it was a brave piece of legislation, a brave bit of action that we needed to solve the problem of you know, illegal immigration to this country. So there was quite a lot of enthusiasm around that time for that. You know, we hear the smash the gangs catchphrase a lot from this government, and it's just going to take more than that. And I know the Conservatives are all very, you know, they're having their internal debate probably on the ECHR and their position on that. And in terms of reforming, and I'd be interested to know what your callers think of this, particularly when we look at ICE and we look at what Trump's doing over in America. And I'm not necessarily attaching any of my personal politics to this, but I think deportation is going to become an issue, and in our kind of political language, a lot more in the UK. And I'd be really interested to see how Reform and the Conservative parties, you know, as we build to the next election and the problem of illegal immigration inevitably doesn't get any better, it'd be interesting to see how that kind of American theme enters our politics.
Yeah, absolutely, because there is, you know, the Venn diagram naturally throws up that correlation. So we will we'll watch over the next few years as to how that plays out. Heathrow, of course, was in the news yesterday after Rachel Reeves. I mean, I've heard of U-turns and reverse ferrets, but, you know, this is the party that was so wedded to net zero and suddenly have gone, yeah, we don't believe in the end of the planet anymore because, you know, against our very own words, we're going to build a runway. Now, I'm quite supportive of a runway, but they weren't. Ed Miliband certainly wasn't. They'd all voted against it. Ed had previously threatened to resign under Gordon Brown, of course, over this very issue. And here they are turning it all around. But fear not, because according to Ryanair's Michael O'Leary, it won't happen until 2050 anyway. God knows why it takes so long to do things in this country. Your previous boss, sorry to bring Boris Johnson up again, but, you know, he was the guy you worked for. He didn't go a bundle on the third runway either, did he?
No, I mean, look, it's a hugely politically contentious issue. I'm not quite sure why the Labour Party want to get into an internal fight on it, which is, you know, we will inevitably see with Ed Miliband, what we've inevitably already seen with Sadiq Khan. Look, yesterday, going for growth, all the rest of it, I kind of, and don't get me wrong, a lot of conservative think tanks and conservative thinkers, you know, were pretty positive about it because it is, you know, very big, you know, capital letters growth stuff, supply side reforms, etc., etc. Like yourself, I think a third runway, yeah, why not? Let's go for it. But the problem for me is that you just don't get a sense that any of this is going to happen in months, in years, and the way things are, unfortunately, in this country, and it's very depressing to admit, potentially decades. So if I'm sat there watching a chancellor who, weeks ago was saying it was all doom and gloom, this is the most, the worst economic situation we've had since the war, basically created a self-fulfilling prophecy that allowed the city and the markets to turn around and say, we have no confidence in you. Yeah. And then all of a sudden there's a kind of, slightly grimaced smile saying everything's rosy, everything's brilliant. If I'm watching that and I'm a voter and my food prices, when I do my shop, my food bills are going up, my utility bills are going up, my wage is stagnated, I'm a small business, and the national insurance NICS rise on businesses has gone up, so I can't employ as many people. I'm watching yesterday and I'm going, you're living in some alternate kind of make-believe fairy tale land. Yeah. I mean, what is going to be delivered, now for the great British public?
Well, indeed, and up until relatively recently, it would have been, sort of in cracking news for the Conservatives, and Kemi Badenoch would have been, rubbing her hands on a daily basis. It would have been open goal. She'd have been out there eating in all those lovely Westminster restaurants on a nightly basis, raising a glass to her inevitable success in a few years' time. But of course, then these pesky characters called Reform UK came along and kind of stole the clothes.
Well, I tell you what, if I was Reform at this moment in time, I would watch a really out-of-touch Labour government talk about, you know what, Ian, I can't even remember what it was called, like the Oxbridge growth corridor, in the south of England. Right. I'd watch all that stuff and I'd go, we've got a real opportunity here to make the economy work for, in fairness, actually, it made me think of levelling up yesterday. I know it didn't quite come off. I know people scoffed at it. But what did that mean? That was kind of bus routes in Middlesbrough. That was
I liked it. I thought it was a great phrase, levelling up. Yeah. I didn't see what was wrong with that.
And it was revamped, train stations in Darlington. Yesterday, I got none of that. And if I was Reform, I'd be looking, this is a real opportunity for us. Yeah. Yes, growth is the aim of the Labour government, but they don't know how to get there. They don't know how to make it feel real and attainable for regular people. There's a real opportunity for Reform. You're right, Ian.
Yeah. Also, this one, the assisted dying bill, of course, which is incredibly contentious for obvious reasons. It does divide the room. I'm not sure whether you ever really drag one side across to yours on this one. It's kind of like those abortion, those kind of debates. You sort of tend to either believe that or you don't. And I know there's some grey area on this, but there's certainly controversy either way. Assisted dying campaigners are considering replacing the High Court judge element of the proposals with a panel of experts to decide on assisted death. That's going to do, I would have thought, very little to support their side of the argument here.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's an incredibly contentious issue. And I think that for a lot of people, it will sit really awkwardly. Anything that means that makes the decision for someone in their assisted dying easier, I think is going to make people feel really nervous. And around the time we had this vote, a lot of the people who, in inverted commas, lost the vote, who were very, very anti this piece of legislation, they wanted it to be, at least in the next few stages, wanted it to be really thought out and us to really, really take our time on this. I think a lot of really reasonable people, whatever they think about this policy, and in fairness, we do have a court's backlog. I mean, we've heard the Labour Party talk about that, the Labour government, talk about that, and, they are right. That is just a reality. But we really need to think carefully about this legislation. And as people who were very much in favour of the bill, a lot of the assurances they gave during that process to those on the other side were like, we're going to take our time on this. Yeah. And I think that dropping that High Court judge's approval, I think that will make people quite a little bit nervous on such a huge emotive issue.
Absolutely. Although the courts, of course, argue that it would overwhelm them. It would overwhelm the system if you are looking at the amount of time involved in a judge. So it remains contentious. We will see how far it goes. I just want to bring this story in, if I can, Oscar, as well. This has just come out. Russian arrest warrant for UK journalist. This is Jerome Starkey of this parish, of where I said he's the Sun's defence editor, a very well-respected journalist, appears on the programme from time to time as well, but a Russian court has accused him of illegally crossing the border into Russia to report on Ukraine's defence. Now, we can laugh this stuff off, but I wouldn't want to have an arrest warrant from Russia against me, because, you know, you don't know what's going to happen each time you walk into a cafe, for goodness sake. And we can say this is just blood. Downing Street have condemned this, by the way. They've called it desperate rhetoric from Putin's administration, but disturbing nonetheless when reporters can't simply do their job.
Yeah, and it's real kind of Russia playbook at this moment in time, scare tactics. And if anything, and you're right not to laugh it off or to, you know, kind of shrug your shoulders at it. It's great that Downing Street have condemned it. And, you know, from Jerome's perspective, you know, it should almost be worn as a badge of honour that he's holding power to account. He's doing the job of a journalist during incredibly difficult times. So, yeah, I mean, it's really good you're raising that. And I think that should be a badge of honour for someone like Jerome. That's someone doing his job right.
Absolutely spot on. Oscar, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Oscar Reddrop, he's a former special advisor to Boris Johnson when Mr Johnson was our Prime Minister. Of course, remember those heady days of Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister? Now we have, it started out all good, didn't it, with old Bojo? There he was giving it large and sounding enthusiastic, great at flogging optimism to us mortals, and it all looked like sunny uplands for about 10 minutes, and then sort of, didn't quite work out. Now we've got Keir Starmer. So well done to everybody who voted for the mighty red one to turn up in number 10. Oh, there were some other Prime Ministers in between. We haven't mentioned those. Nonetheless, that's what we're left with at the moment. Thoughts on the Starmer versus Trump on immigration is... It would be the same, by the way, if Rishi Sunak was still the Prime Minister, but it's quite unbelievable just to see those differences approach. We're going to start it's going to be illegal to interfere with people's lives, allowing them to cross the channel. You will be charged with nautical crimes, you bad gang people. Donald Trump, you're going to Guantanamo. That's it. Yeah. Get on the plane. Very simple stuff. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but talk about taking action versus inaction. Thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000. 20 past 2. This is Talk.
worry is that if you try and turn Heathrow into an even bigger site than it is now, there'll be chaos. The roads will be an absolute quagmire. You won't be able to get around the M25. You know, you'll have to knock down a load of houses to build another runway. You know, the whole idea, which has been knocking around for 22 years, is a nonsense, isn't it?
You know, even Sadiq Khan is now threatening legal action against the policy of this government. So Labour really need to sort of get their act together and get a united front on this if they have any chance, even in the longer term, of delivering on this.
Yeah, exactly right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Derek says, when Donald Trump visits the UK, can we keep him for a week? You'd only need a week, wouldn't you? You know, so they could leg it again. Jeremy's in Newbury, and I don't say that as a by the way, it does say that as a natural supporter of Donald. I don't particularly like Donald Trump, but I quite like not liking. I don't want to like politicians. I just want them to do the job they say they're going to do, and I don't care if they're a sizzling lefty. If they've told the electorate that's what they're going to do, then you go, okay, you might be talking tripe, but you're doing what you said you were going to do, right? That sort of makes sense. Our lot, even by left-wing standards, are not doing what they were going to do. They said they weren't going to look at environment, we're going to save the planet. Well, how are you going to do that? We're going to open a massive runway where loads of big fat planes to land on it whenever they fancy. Jeremy in Newbury, this is on shop theft attacks on retail workers, says, working in retail most of my life, the assumption that all thieves are hoodie-wearing chavs. I have seen countless times men dressed in smart business attire put 20 high-value champagne bottles in a trolley, then cover them up with vegetables and simply walk out. The security guard isn't allowed to chase them. Why is the security guard not allowed to chase them? The security guard should ninja the neck out of them, surely. Isn't that how it should be? That's what I want to hear. You remember the fella on the Burt Kwok from the Pink Panther movies? I once had a drink with that fella in a bar. It took me about 2 minutes to realise, blimey, it's Burt Kwok from the Pink Panther movie. Me and a mate were out in the West End of London, and in walked. But you want one of those characters to get down there and get a little bit jiggy with the old scissor kicks, right? I think that's fair enough. Ben's in Leicester on this point of retail crime. Ben, what have you got for us? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. So, for me, this issue, I think we've reached a point where the consequence of 20, 30 years of a gradual erosion of the values of society. So, what I mean by that is I'm 47, I've worked full-time for 30 years, and when I was a kid, it wasn't this instant gratification. You got told no. You got treats on your birthday, you got presents at Christmas, and you had to work for stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas for the last 30 years, we've got away from that. Nobody says no to kids. There's no consequences. So we've ended up with generations that are used to just getting what they want, when they want, with no effort put in to get there. And that, unfortunately, is the consequence of 30 or 40 years of the way society's gone, making excuses for kids and. You know, so it all kind of it kind of all sort of ties in, doesn't it? In that respect, it kind of all these knock-on effects have come to fruition. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've had a fairly decent career. I've got a reasonable house, a nice car, and I take pride in that because I've worked for it. Yeah. Nobody gave me anything on a plate. I've grafted all my life, but we seem to have a generation now that they don't have the same ethics, the same work ethic, the same application. Yeah. Not all kids. I'm not. No, and not even most kids. But the percentage that, albeit small, seems to be growing a bit, Ben, and slightly more brazen than it once was. Yeah, you know, I'm a parent. You know, my partner and I, we've got 3 kids between us. They work hard, they go to school. You know, we brought them up with those ethics, whereas that doesn't seem to be the case always.
Yeah, spot on. Ben, thank you. You're right. This one comes in from Debbie, who says, years ago I worked in a department store. One of the ladies that worked on the tills had her husband come in a couple of times a week, chose trainers, sports gear, that kind of thing, and take them to her till. She would go through the process of scanning the items, all the time covering the barcode with her hand, bagging it up and seemingly taking payment. She got away with it for ages. So brazen. That touches on a point that was made earlier about internal crime as well, which, you know, on the moral compass, that's just as bad, that stuff, right? Gordon says, I work in a shop and I don't agree with the guy who just said that fraud from the inside is bigger. We have always had people who work here steal, but they always get caught, as there are checks that we do that spot this kind of stuff. Theft from shoplifters, on the other hand, is off the scale. No consequences, so nothing will change, and they are getting more brazen and violent. We don't deal with paedophiles, so we will definitely not deal with shoplifters. Well, I think that kind of says it all, and somebody, thank you, Gordon, for that. Somebody made a similar analogy about knife crime. You know, we can't sort knife crime out. We can't sort out grooming gangs. So what, on the pecking order of importance, what's the likelihood that we're going to solve shoplifting anytime soon? The only potential way you might get in on that would be a law that puts shoplifting. Then again, you know, there's laws about stabbing, right? There's laws about paedophilia. Would you have a law that said if you caught shoplifting, you go to jail for 5 years? We sort of become a kind of Singapore light sort of setup. The theory of that is we don't live in that kind of world where the government is so powerful they can do this stuff. That shouldn't be. It should be the citizen. We should live in a civilised, progressive place where the citizen doesn't want to do that, because everybody's got a stake in the society in which they live, and all the while we continue to grow and flourish in a world where people don't feel like they've got a stake, and, you know, it's a challenging time that we're living in. I guess some people, and I find this, it's not an excuse, by the way, for bad behaviour, because those that have grown up with nothing and still have nothing and struggle every day but manage to raise 2 kids brilliantly with great manners and morality, still somehow stick food on the table for the family and do so against all financial odds, right up against it, but would never ever dream of resorting to any sort of criminality. That's most people, by the way, who are in that kind of poverty trap. But there's one contingent who will. But they're not doing it because of cost of living. They're doing it because they can. How do we stop this horrendous growing crime so that we can conclude they can't? At the moment, it's so easy. You can almost, I was thinking about it, talking to a previous caller, you could, you know, be sitting at home with your mates, smoking a doobie, you know, with a bit of music playing, sitting around the kitchen table, trying to put the world to rights, and someone goes, I fancy a vodka. I'll nip down the offie and nick one. And that's what you do. You just nip down to the offie and nick one. You wouldn't pay, you just go in and get it. No one's going to stop you. That would have been taboo, even by criminal standards. That would have been like, oh, how are you going to do it? Oh, well, there's a back door. You distract him over there, and I'll go in there and nick. I'll take it off the shelf, and when I do that, you pretend to fall over, and then they'll all have their eye. You don't have to do that anymore. You just go in there and nick it. Just take it. No one's going to chase you. No one's going to give it a go. 0344 499 1000. And Lash says, a simple fix for shop crime: arm the security guards with tasers. The same young animal with a machete walks in, zap them. I like the idea, but they will never do it. Of course they won't. Just gone 1:30. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Simon, who heard our previous guest, Katie Bourne, who's the Sussex Police and Crime Commissioner, says, I heard your interview with Katie. I'm from Sussex. Katie has increased the precept significantly. The reduction in crimes she talks about is people not bothering to report many crimes anymore. Like many have no confidence in the police any longer, says Simon. There is always that, isn't there? It's about like the time when they said, well, there's no drugs detected. What was it? No drugs detected on the one particular train line. We didn't detect any drug. No, we've solved the drug problem on this particular area. We used to get loads of people that were, carrying all sorts of Class A's and a few other bits and pieces besides. Now we've sorted it. And the reality was there was no policing there. They got rid of the policing of it, so there was no report of any crime because there was no one there to try and nick the crime, which is a different end of the telescope to look at these kind of stories. 25-3. Now, Donald Trump plans to house what he describes as the worst criminal illegal aliens at a detention centre in Guantanamo Bay. The US president will sign an executive order directing Defence and Homeland Security to open the facility with 30,000 beds available. Trump says some detainees are too dangerous for other countries to hold. Let's speak with Greg Swenson, friend of the programme, of course, chair of Republicans Overseas UK. Greg, good afternoon to you. This is really, I guess you could call it an extension of Trump doing what he said he would do.
Yeah, it's a great point, Ian. Most of the things he's done were very well telegraphed, whether it was in the campaign, during the campaign, or after, during the transition. So not a lot of real surprises, but maybe just the speed and the energy of all that he's done might be a bit surprising. But most of the content, most of the real meat on the bone was predictable.
Indeed. I mean, Guantanamo Bay, did that surprise you? We'd forgotten about the Bay.
Yeah.
Is it still there? Do people still lurk in there from back in the old days?
That's right. Yeah, that was a surprise because, as you pointed out, I hadn't really thought about it a lot. Yeah. There are still some terrorists there from the war on terror. And I think, there's been talk of actually using one or two of those prisoners as bargaining chips. But yeah, it's a very functional place. It's on an island. It's very secure, obviously, and so I think it's a good use of government and taxpayer money. We might as well use it if there's capacity, which there is.
Yeah, and he's talked about detainees too dangerous for other countries to hold. So in a curious way there, he's sort of taking a responsibility of saying, look, we're not even going to put your own people back to you. We'll keep them here because these are the real bad guys.
Right. We surely don't want them, terrorizing people in their home countries, or there's a chance that they could escape and come back to the U.S. I mean, so many of these criminals were convicted in their home countries of crimes, and then especially in Venezuela, where the government just let them out of jail so they could illegally migrate to the U.S.
Indeed. Couple of other areas. Trump signing an executive order to end racial indoctrination in K-12 schools, accusing them of spreading anti-American ideology. Again, this is all part and parcel of what Trump said he would do. This sort of curious upside-down world that the West has found itself working in over the last few years. And schools, of course, have always been a big focus for that. He's on that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, if you want to teach your children that nonsense, do it at home. Buy the books on your own on some weird internet porn site and do it yourself. I'm not advocating that. I'm just suggesting it shouldn't be from the schools that taxpayers pay for.
Yeah. And how did that sort of, we see it in this country as well at universities and some schools. The sort of the desire that there is something for some reason noble and a bit cool about such self-flagellating and suggesting, we're the bad guys, or the other people are the good guys, we're the bad guys. What is that?
Yeah, I don't know. Look, this has been going on for too long. The progressive radical left has taken over the institutions, the universities, the media, and even some big corporates. And I think, you know, the school system is basically controlled by the teachers' unions. It's not controlled locally. And so I think what President Trump is saying is mostly about public schools that are funded by taxpayers and really controlled, for better or for worse, by the teachers' unions. This all started in the red states, especially Florida, when Governor Ron DeSantis started getting rid of some of this insanity after, you know, back in 21, 22. And it really is popular with parents. It's popular with the people. And the problem was the blue states weren't able to do anything about it because they are the governments in the blue states, as well as Democrat congressmen, are controlled, really owned by the teachers unions. Yeah. So the parents in blue states and Democrat states were really suffering because their local governments and their governors wouldn't do anything about this nonsense. And this is a chance for President Trump, for the federal government, to at least elevate the standards.
Yeah. Executive orders, of course, don't come with strictly a straight green light. There's all sorts of pesky lawyers and all manner of characters that might get involved. We saw this, you know, almost instantaneously with the birthright executive order that was pounced on by a judge. It can also be scuppered at different levels. So it's legally binding, but in any democracy, it's up for being challenged. Does that kick things into the long grass? How much wiggle room does Trump have?
I think with all of the moves that he's made since the inauguration, there's so many of these things that, yes, many will be rejected by a judge. Many will have to go to Congress for laws to be changed. But I think with the sheer volume of them, many of these executive orders will actually be in place immediately. So, you know, in spite of the pushback, in spite of the fights, but ultimately, if some of these things are overturned by judges, yes, you have to go to the Congress. I prefer that. And I think when we see presidents like Biden especially was passing executive orders or having his government bureaucracy, the government agencies, enforce laws that were never written, that they knew they couldn't get through Congress. Whereas I think some of these, like birthright citizenship, like cost cutting, these things will get passed by the Congress. So he's just telegraphing what we will see from the legislative branches, which is the way it should work.
Yeah, indeed. Greg, always good to get your view on these things. Thank you for your time. He's Greg Swenson. He's the chair of Republicans Overseas UK, with us here on Talk. More comment coming in from you. David says, how can it be right that the government can spend £3,000 a day on clothes for illegal immigrants but can't pay £300 a year of cold weather payments for pensioners? This country is so messed up, I would rather live somewhere else. Great show, says Dave, who's a pensioner from Louth. Yeah, I mean, it's all those examples, isn't it? Right there. I mean, there it is, bang on. They're the examples people look at and say, the country is messed up. The country is in a mess. And when Donald Trump came in, and we're going to keep talking about Donald Trump, it's such an extraordinary tipping point, I sense, and only time will tell how it pans out, to have a kind of, you know, just a very basic common sense approach to stuff that is kind of not just non-negotiable, but you can't argue against it. You know, some of the kind of gender madness is well known. Whatever the rights and wrongs of buying £3,000 a day on clothes for people who are not even meant to be in the country, that's a genuine comparison. 300 quid a year cold weather payments for pensioners, get rid of those, but buy some warm jumpers for people who aren't meant to be. I mean, you can't make that up. And that sort of Trump-like approach, it doesn't have to be Trump, by the way, it's just one example, but that sort of approach of, hang on, no, something's wrong here. Something's really wrong. And you know, there's 1,000 of these examples. There's 10,000 of these kind of examples out there. And we wonder why the world is going absolutely stark raving mad. Ben is in Essex on retail crime. How you doing, Ben?
Yeah, I'm good, Ian. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear, yeah. How you doing?
Yeah, very well. Yeah, I've just into what you're saying there. And this retail thing, it's almost like bullying to me. It's like, you know, when you're weak and you're vulnerable, bullies will exploit you.
Yeah.
But until you actually stand up and make a stand or give them a whack, nothing will happen. I mean, I would love to see security men with tasers in our shops, or more police around. And I don't think anyone would disagree to make a tough stance on crime, immigration, stupid policies in this country. I mean, look what Trump's done in America, you know, and all these deportations. I mean, I think everybody would agree that that's the right thing to do, because we don't have a country. I mean, unless you're Selena Gomez that wants to, you know, virtue signal and cry your eyes out.
Pray for Selena. Pray for Selena, Ben.
Oh, don't. The thing is, it might not be pretty. It might be a bit ugly, but it's necessary, and I think we all want to see that. You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's nothing. You don't have the moral high ground just because you want to keep people in your country that aren't meant to be there. It doesn't make you a better person, and it doesn't make you a bad person because you think those people aren't meant to be there.
Correct. I mean, I look at these boats coming on the shores, and I look at all them people thinking, how many of those are murderers or molesters or rapists, or what damage are they going to do to the country? And, you know, these people don't mix well with society. And, you know, all these men that come in, they're all, you know, they've got primal instincts. You know, where are they going to get their women from? Where are they going to get their needs from? And I think we need a tough stance. And it's, until that starts happening, we're only going to get worse. And it is like bullies in the playgrounds. You know, at the minute we're being bullied, we're being pushed around, we're being shoved around.
Yep.
And you have to take a tough stance. And if it means getting your knuckles scraped or, you know, a bit of blood being drawn, so be it. But peace, unfortunately, is only ever attained through violence. I know it's probably not a nice way to put it, but that is, you know, the more liberal we are, the more we're going to be bullied.
Well, and it was probably a nice experiment back in the day when somebody went, oh, look, we've been through the rough times, let's try a different approach, you know, and then you realise, actually, in some areas that just doesn't work. Listen, great call, Ben. Thank you very much indeed for that. And if you look, the boat crossing thing on the channel, I mean, it's pretty simple. If you just invite 800 people a week into your country and you don't know who they are, you've got a problem. Doesn't matter. You could be the greatest leftist, liberal dodgepot on the planet. You'd have to acknowledge that, surely. And even if you said, well, you think most of them are criminals? No, I've never thought most of these people are criminals. I'm pretty sure only a small percentage are. But I don't know what percentage. I've got no idea because I don't know who they are, and neither does anybody else for that matter. That's a genuine, of all the things that are security, and we live in a world where, you know, you need a pass for this and a documentation for that. You can't just walk into buildings because someone's at the door, the seat, and yet you row across the English Channel. I mean, come on, seriously? That's a big, big offence. Now, I get it. The minute you claim asylum, you cease to be illegal. That's the way the law of the land works. But you've got to apply a bit of kind of Trumpian logic to this, haven't you? And got 50,000 people a year, 30, 40, 50,000 a year over the last few years. Something's wrong. Something is upside down. Something's messed up. Can't go on. Can't go on. We're going to sort it. 0344 499 1000. Gaz in Kidderminster says, if you use reasonable force to defend your home, the same should apply to retail business. You'd think so, wouldn't you? Kaz in Bedford, who quite liked the idea of the security staff getting jiggy in the scissor kick department, says, my conscientious son had a job at a small Sainsbury's when he was at uni. He caught a shoplifter with a witness and sat on him for 20 minutes, brackets pre-George Floyd, waiting for the police. Eventually they turned up. Action taken? Nada. How is that a thing? Nothing. Well, you got him? Yeah, he's here. Look, see this bloke here? He's a thief. Right? Where? What was he? Is he run? No, under my leg. Him. He's a thief. What are you going to do? Well, on this occasion, so we're not going to do anything at all. No further action. Thank you very much. Good Lord. 0344 499 1000.
as for whatever government comes after this woeful administration, if it's reform, they won't do the third runway either. So I just can't see this actually being any kind of answer to this country's economic woes. And as you say, the problem is that for all the fine words and, a load of blah, really, that she was giving us today, in the end, she's still taxing everybody to the hilt. She's still making it harder and more expensive to employ people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
3, it's Talk. Voice of Doom. It's a brand new... Yesterday's one went. That got one, didn't it? We had an email earlier from Fiona in Crowborough who says... we had a message earlier. She says, I'm a tennis player, so I'm often unable to watch the whole show. I was intrigued to know whether there was a correct answer to the Voice of Doom, which has intrigued me for the past couple of weeks. Now, I don't know whether Fiona is listening or knocking out a couple of sets down there in Sussex, but either way, yes, it did get one, and it was Louise Casey. Dame Louise Casey, I think is her correct title, who often gets enlisted by the government to carry out... to head up an inquiry. That's it, an inquiry. She does that kind of stuff. Louise Casey was the right answer. Then we had one yesterday, and that was one straight away, and that, I think, was... Who was it yesterday? Pat McFadden yesterday. Now we've got a brand new one today. Let's have a listen to the voice.
I don't accept those numbers.
Who is that? Any ideas? Don't call in, there is no prize. 87222, you can message in if you fancy having a crack. Here it is again.
I don't accept those numbers.
If you think you know who that is, then contact us. If we get a right answer, you'll find out on the other side of the news. If we don't, it rolls over to tomorrow. Here it is.
I don't accept those numbers.
I don't accept those numbers. Who doesn't accept those numbers? 87222. Back to the calls. Mike is in Devon. How you doing, Mike?
I'm fine. Sunny here today, Ian. Glorious.
Good.
Just been down to the beach for a swim. That's a bit of an exaggeration.
That's true.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's all right.
Anyway.
Glad to hear it. You didn't go down for a beach for a swim.
No, I was fibbing.
Nice thought, though. Anyway, what are your thoughts, Mike?
Well, just building on what some people have said earlier about, to me, the whole issue can be summed up in relation to shoplifting that goes unpunished and illegal immigration. There are 4 words, really. There are no consequences. Yeah. And until there are consequences, then nothing is really going to change. And I'm afraid that we don't have politicians who actually want to represent the views of the people who elect them. We've got to that situation, unfortunately. Yeah. It's as simple as that, really.
It's a consequences thing, isn't it? I mean, how was that eradicated, Mike? How did that very simple notion of the human condition? It's not even a law of the land; it's a human condition, isn't it?
Well, that's right. I mean, we've seen over the... I mean, I'm in my early 70s now, but what I've seen is a steady erosion of what I would call family values. Yeah. And if you want to go back and look from a political angle at when everything changed, was when it was in our dear friend Mr. Blair, or Lord Blair, or Sir Blair, or whatever he's called now, when he changed what were old-fashioned unemployment benefits, for instance, into entitlements. Yeah. And this entitlement, but now it's extended to kids. They can't be criticised at school. And so behaviour in that sense has worsened progressively. As I say, it comes down to what I would simply term family values. They appear to be a lot weaker than they were, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think it is. It's probably, like all of these things, there's not just one answer, there's maybe many, but it does certainly fall under that category you correctly identified as a lack of consequences. Listen, Mike, go back for another swim. Thank you. Great to have you with us. That's Mike in Devon on shoplifting. Elaine is in Derbyshire on the issue of migration. Elaine, afternoon to you.
Hello. I was going to say, I think at this point we just have to recognise we're in an abusive relationship with our government.
Yeah.
How many ways in how many elections do we have to say we want the volume turned down on immigration? Not turned off, but turned down, and we want to choose who and when. We keep getting told that what about the doctors and nurses, and the immigration increases and we never have enough nurses or doctors. It's the gaslighting. And it's even like, for example, they keep saying the NHS has got no money, right?
Yeah.
So the first bill they introduce for the NHS is euthanasia. The first bill. Now, I don't know about you.
It's a good point. Of all the things we're dealing with, yeah.
The list of things that needs to be fixed in the NHS.
Yeah.
And they're bringing in something that would cost them more money.
Yeah.
Another example, the failing schools. The first thing they do is decide that they're going to make every school in the UK provide a 30-minute breakfast club. Where's the money coming from?
Yep.
How's the school going to staff it? I thought we had no money. But apparently they've got money for this. That we keep the things that we ask for, we don't get. But euthanasia, they can vote on it, do a working group and bring the bill back by April.
Yeah, there's a lot of time dedicated to that. In fact, there's an awful lot of time dedicated of all the things.
And I know a lot of people in the chats are going to be saying vote reform and all this, but I'm telling you now, unless Nigel Farage has the ability to do what Donald Trump has done, which is fire all the people, the civil servants, and get rid of them, like that other guy said who just phoned before you, there are no consequences. If I refuse to do my job, or you came on air and just said, I don't feel like it today, well, I'm just going to speak about what I want to speak about, you get sacked.
Yep.
There are no consequences for civil servants who don't, and then when they don't do their job, they run to the Guardian and say, I was being bullied by the minister.
And I think, if nothing else, the civil service is way too big. So, we could certainly start on the size of it. I've no doubt that you could probably cut it in half and nobody would notice a darn thing.
Yeah, but until they have like the shoplifting.
Yeah. Until
they have consequences for leaking national security things, some of the things they leak I actually think are quite dangerous to the safety and security of this country.
Sure.
You read things and you think, crikey, they're like when the vaccines were given out, they were leaking all sorts. The contracts and how much money and this and that. It's absolutely unacceptable. If they leaked, I used to work in a school. If they leaked even a quarter of some of the information, what happened to data protection that these people leaked, would have been out of a job. There are no consequences for stealing. There are no consequences for ministers who don't do what they say they're going to do. There's no consequences for civil servants. There's no consequences for anyone. Even there's no consequences for Hugh Edwards. You can have child abuse images on your phone and go back to your mansion. The only people there are consequences for is if you say something Keir Starmer doesn't like online about...
Big consequences. Big consequences for that, but not for much else. It's a great point, Elaine, and a great follow-on from Mike's call as well about the lack of consequence. You often wonder, does the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, I know she's off the left, she's not stupid, does she never sit in the Home Office reading these stories about shoplifting and knife crime and go, I need to do something about this? No, I'm not going to come up with a two-stage verification to buy a knife on Amazon. Did not a single advisor in the room say, with respect, Home Secretary, that's not even going to touch the sides, mate. I think you need to be a little more robust than getting the Amazon people to have better ID processes, because that's not even the big issue here. Otherwise, you just get a knife out your mum's kitchen drawer, right? I mean, we kind of all know that. Carmen says, I was a security guard in a shop. If I was, I would spray perps with non-removable ink to be tracked down later, rounding their clothes in the process, or ruining their clothes, I think I should say. Yes, good point as well. Maybe that's the answer. Did Yvette Cooper ever think about that? I doubt it. We'll continue to take your calls shortly. We've got a brand new voice of doom. Here's the voice.
I don't accept those numbers.
If you think you know who that is, 87222, we might get a winner. We'll tell you on the other side of the news. If not, it rolls over right now, 3 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. Welcome back. Home of Common Sense. Loads to wade through in this section. We've been talking about shoplifting and attacks on retail workers. They hit a record high. I mean, when it comes to attacks, we're talking violence here. 2,000 incidents are reported every day in this country in terms of thefts. 55,000 thefts recorded every day. It's getting worse. Nothing seems to be getting done. What is the answer? What's behind the explosion in retail crime? We'll have more from you on that. Also this afternoon, Channel migrants who delay rescues until reaching British waters, putting lives at risk, could face up to 5 years in jail under Keir Starmer's new border security bill. But is that really likely to deter anyone from crossing the Channel? After all, I thought that was the whole point in getting tough on this. And Chinese electric cars are set to flood the UK with more than 400,000 on the road by 2030. Are some already here? I know the States have got these things. Do we have them here? And I don't know anybody who's got a Chinese electric car. I couldn't even give you the name of one of these things. But apparently they're just like a Tesla, but a hell of a lot cheaper. Oh, plus they might be spying on you. There is that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So the voice of doom. We played you a brand new voice. It was day one of a brand new voice. Will it stay as day one? Has somebody got it right? This was the voice.
I don't accept those numbers.
I don't accept those numbers. Who is it? Joe Swinson? No. Ruth Davidson? It is not. Kate Forbes? No. Kirsty Blackman? No. Hazel Blears? In there every day? No. However, we have got a right answer. Malcolm in Antrim. Kaiser Dugdale is the right answer. You might be going, Kaiser? What? Kaiser? Oh, Kezia. Kaiser Wilhelm. Kezia Dugdale, who was the leader of Scottish Labour for a couple of years. I think from, I'm tempted to say 2015 to 2017, if my anorak political knowledge serves me correctly, but it was in that ballpark. She's been a Scottish politician for some time. Kezia Dugdale is the right answer. Well done to Malcolm in Antrim, who was the first through, if not the only one through, was he, with that right answer? I think he was. Or maybe there was a couple of others. Oh, there were a few others. There was. I thought that was quite a tricky one, actually, which still begs the question as to why the previous one, the Louise Casey one, went on for 2 weeks. I don't get that. What happened there? We'll come up with another belter tomorrow for the programme. 3:05. Now, migrants who delay rescues until they reach British waters could face up to 5 years in jail. This is a new border security bill that will make it illegal to supply boat parts or life jackets suspected of being used by people smuggling gangs. Meanwhile, new figures reveal that taxpayers are funding new clothes and shoes for illegal channel migrants at a cost of £3,000 a day. That's like 4 million quid over the last 3 years, by the way. We have crunched the numbers. Let's speak with Tony Smith, former Director General of the Border Force, who knows his way around this story a lot, always helps us out with these kind of issues. Afternoon to you, Tony. I wasn't even aware that there was a thing here that apparently happened. So some people on those boats mid-rescue refuse to be rescued. Is that broadly what's happened? Now, if they refuse to be rescued because they want to reach British waters, they could get 5 years in jail for scuppering the rescue, broadly speaking.
Yeah, hi Ian. Good to speak again. So, I mean, what you really want is this law to be passed in France, and for the French.
Yes, that was my first thought.
And it's not. This is fine. This is only enforceable in the UK, right? And all this sort of mischief is happening in France, as we know. Well, we've spoken about it many times. That the French are the ones that are allowing populated dinghies to float off. They don't intervene. I've heard terrible stories, Ian, about, even corpses being taken off some of those boats and the boat being allowed to go. That is clearly a crime scene. It should be sealed off. Everybody on that boat should be taken straight back to Calais and interviewed in the police station, but they're not. So a lot of the mischief has been correctly identified in this legislation, but my fear is that most of the mischief is being conducted on French waters in Calais or further away from the UK. And no matter what we do with UK law enforcement, there's only so much we can do when, we're talking about extraterritorial mischief like this.
I was trying to work out how this might play out. So are we talking, I'm assuming, Tony, because detail has only just come out, so you'd have a boat leaving France and the French border force would go, oh, look, there is a boat leaving France. We'll try and intervene. And they shout across to a fella on the boat, come this way because we stop your boat. And the fella on the boat says, no, we're going to the UK. And off you go. And then the British government say to the French border police, can we have the CCTV footage that you've got of that person refusing to stop? And when they get to our side, we will then prosecute them. I mean, it's as I'm saying it out loud, it sounds ridiculous, but that, I'm assuming, could be the only thing this could refer to.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, actually, Ian. And I've seen a couple of cases prosecuted here for mischief in France. I mean, I remember a few people getting battered on the beach there by people who I did identify come across in a boat. The criminality took place in France, but we were able to prosecute through the UK court. So I think that is exactly how they foresee it working. But the problem, as you know as well as I do, is that the French need to be able to stop the boats on the water. They have never, in the last 6 or 7 years, been prepared to do that because they say that endangers lives. And so that policy, unless that policy changes and they say, well, all right, we will now, whether they like it or not, we'll start rescuing them in French waters, this isn't really going to work. And I don't see it as a deterrent, Ian. That's the real point. Is it going to stop people wanting to come across here? I don't think it will, really, because the pull factors are still there. So this is the third piece of legislation we've had in 4 years on this now, and we've yet, I think, to be able to find a solution which actually stops the boats. There are all measures that all successive governments have brought in that are designed to help law enforcement, but it's not really so much as a criminal justice problem. This is a problem of being able to deter people from making that journey in the first place. And the only way you're going to do that is to ensure that when they do get to British territorial waters, they aren't allowed to stay in the UK. And for the most part, they still are being allowed to stay in the UK. And that is a very simple message that's picked up by an unending pool of migrants in the EU who belong. Is actually you'd still need to pay this money because it's still worth it, because you will get to stay in the UK. And I don't think this legislation is going to fix that, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I'm constantly confused, Tony. I don't, and you maybe have seen different evidence for this, but I know the French coastline is lengthy. It's kind of, but one would assume these departures from French soil happen within a certain kind of part of the coast, even if it's quite big. I don't think I've ever read a story where the French police suddenly descended on a beach where this was the people were about to leave on a boat, and the French say no, we've tried, we've scuppered a third of these crossings, and so maybe it has happened, but I've never seen images of that. You might think someone somewhere, the woman that's got a tea room over there overlooking the beach, or someone walking their dog would have gone, hang on a sec, there's 400 people on a beach here, they look as if they're about to leg it, I'll ring the French police. I've never heard these stories.
Well, we have given them quite a lot of help, Ian, as you know, including equipment, surveillance equipment. We've offered assets, Border Force assets, to go and help them with this particular problem of identifying where this mischief is taking place. But it is a little bit like whack-a-mole along that beach there. There's the vast stretches of that they're not covering to be able to intervene and stop the smuggling gangs operating there. But I mean, for me, it's always been the case, even before the boats, Ian, that when the French do actually catch somebody, they just let them go again. They don't do anything with them. So assume some of these people are unlawfully in France or unlawfully in the EU. They're not actually arrested and put into the French enforcement system and deported back whence they came on the asylum. And they just basically let go. And next day or next day after that, they're going to have another go. And quite often we see repeat people, who say, well, I didn't make it this time, didn't make it that time, weather was too rough, or didn't have the money. But they will continue to flock to northern France and continue to try to come here for so long as we allow them to stay once they get here. And that is the nub of the problem. And
there was another element to this as well I saw today. Endangering lives at sea is to be a new criminal offence, carrying a jail term of up to 5 years as part of a plan. Border officials will also get powers to seize migrants' phones in the search for intelligence about who helped them cross the channel. I would have thought you could already do that.
Yeah, you can actually. We did have powers under the Illegal Migration Act, to seize phones, Ian, and that was already happening. I think a lot of this stuff has been overlain by additional powers of pre-arrest, but everybody who comes on a small boat is actually arrested by the force and taken into Manston, as you know. So actually, a lot of this is already happening now. I don't want to diss this new legislation entirely. It's always helpful for enforcement to get more powers and more authorities, but for me, the bigger problem is that a lot of these crimes, the mischief that we're trying to stop, is not happening in UK waters. It is happening in French waters and beyond that. Are we saying we're going to extradite people from France or Europe to bring them over here to put them before a British court? Are we going to get the evidence to do that in all of these cases? I don't think so. I think it's going to help a bit with the law enforcement getting additional powers, but will it? It doesn't give you that deterrent that we're all looking for, actually. And that deterrent has to be removals.
100%. And you can tinker around the edges and do all sorts of things, but unless you get serious about it, we're going to be back here every single week, and you and I will be talking to another 20 years, Tony. But listen, it's always good to get your take on these things. Tony Smith, he knows this story well. He's the former Director General of the Border Force. Thank you to him. Comments coming in from you on shoplifting. Oh, by the way, Jenny on Chinese cars. Already in 2024, around half of the most popular electric vehicles sold in the UK hail from China. BYD, Volvo. I don't think Volvo is Chinese, is it? MG, really? Lexus? Polestar, GMW, Aura, DS automobiles. I know these things have Chinese parts in them. But I didn't know Volvo's not owned by the Chinese, is it? Unless there's a big, massive story I've missed. But BYD, I know, is a Chinese thing. I didn't know they were on our roads. So I'm going to ask that question. If you drive a Chinese electric car, I'm sure Jenny will be back in touch to explain the Volvo MG point that we raised. But broadly speaking, if you drive a Chinese electric car, how does that? Do you have to have like a red flag? Are they all red, by the way? Are they all red cars? And do you have to have a little book in the dashboard to refer to if you're not sure what to do morally or the basic instructions of life? Gordy on shoplifting says, my wife used to work in Aberdeen's main shopping street from the 1980s through to the early 2000s. She could give you so many stories, but the one that sticks in my mind are they had a security guard. When they caught them stealing, they took them down to the office, called the police, and when they arrived, took them away every time unless there was some other emergency going on. I remember her saying one young girl that they caught started crying and begged them not to call the police. Their policy, because she was so young, they called the parents. Her father arrived, and he happened to be the assistant police commissioner. She got frog-marched out there by her dad. And one other time, my wife saw someone stealing and was taking out the door with the goods. My wife went out shouting them to stop. She didn't, so my wife started running after her up Union Street into the old graveyard. She was no athlete, never ran or exercised, but she wouldn't let this person go. They both eventually came to a halt, both knackered, puffing and panting. The thief said to her, "Jackie, you never give up, do you?" And promptly handed the goods back, walked away. Yeah, give a bit of a chase. Well, you can't do that because you might endanger your life now. So the instructions from all the shops and the like is, no, you don't want to get hurt. OK, well, you won't catch the tea leaf then, will you? Bill's in Telford. Afternoon to you, Bill. What are your thoughts? Hi.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
All good. Yeah, not bad at all. What are your take on this?
Well, I was just sort of wondering if we're going to see a resurgence in sort of protection rackets around shopkeepers. Because if you can spend sort of like, £100 a week on a fella with a baseball bat around the corner, rather than lose £300 worth of stock every day, being a small businessman, I know which option I'd take.
Yeah, good point. I wonder, I mean, there's probably are some people, maybe some shop areas talking about, having private security, but there's a difference between private security and, hiring the heavies, right?
Well, there is that, but I mean, if you're hiring a security guard, £100 an hour, £100 a day for a security guard to stand there who can't actually do anything.
Can't do anything at all.
You might as well just sort of have someone you're going to pay 50 quid and have him beat up round the corner. Chances are he won't come back.
That's very true. But then would you get nicked by the police for paying somebody to do bad things?
Not if you don't get caught.
Well, that's very true, yeah. There's always going to be the irony, isn't there? The shopkeeper goes to jail, but the shoplifter walks free.
Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, if I opened a Facebook account and called you a nasty name, I'd be in jail.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shoplift and nick a car and break into someone's house, you get absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I've told you about those Facebook posts, Bill. They're coming round. They'll be knocking on your door by 6 o'clock. No need for that. I'm doubting my parentage in that way. Bill, thank you. Bill in Telford. I like the idea. You can see people might, resort to the worst possible scenario to keep their business safe. I mean, what a terrible world. We're talking about getting Tony Soprano to come round and look after your Kit Kats, just in case some chancer decides to go half inching around your store. 0344 499 1000. Coming up on 3:20, this is Talk.
As for whatever government comes after this woeful administration, if it's reform, they won't do the third runway either. So I just can't see this actually being any kind of answer to this country's economic woes. And as you say, the problem is that for all the fine words and, a load of blah, really, that she was giving us today, in the end, she's still taxing everybody to the hilt. She's still making it harder and more expensive to employ people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. This from Scott, who says, I was working in a well-known high street store when a guy walked in with 3 women's leather coats with no receipt that had clearly been nicked from our stock system. So we had 4, but the shelves were empty. I refused, but the manager gave him £400 in cash because he didn't want to cause a scene. I gave my notice the next day. Some companies don't help themselves. Now that's really annoying, isn't it? If you've ever struggled to return something that because you either didn't have the receipt or, you'd gone over the time that you're allowed to send it back or something like that. I had that once in a big department store and it was just ridiculous. And yet if I'd nicked it and then took it back and said I bought it, can I have the money, but I got no receipt, I might have done better. This will be Nigel down in London. What do you got for us, Nigel? Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, one of my points has previously been made about security officers having a taser. I think we have to really understand two other points here. First of all, police officers are not fit for the job. I know you're a bit softly towards the old boys in blue, but they don't do a good job. If they can't even stop a woman on a disabled buggy up north in Sheffield, how are they going to try and stop shoplifters? They don't even bother attending. They're just absolutely fundamentally useless. And furthermore, the demise of the high street means there won't be many shoplifters anymore because everything's going to be online.
Well, there is that, isn't there? So I suppose, you know, you could just roll over and go, well, it's not going to apply anyway, because there'd be nothing to nick.
But the point is, why don't the police do what they're supposed to do? Their remit is to protect people and property, detect and prevent crime. They are absolutely useless.
Is it the individual copper, though, you're talking about here, Nigel?
Of course it is. Of course, I'll give you an example. In my road recently, a lady's house was attacked with her older children at home with crowbars. So the police came along and they said, do you have any CCTV? And the woman said, sadly, we do not. He said, well, there's not much we can do about it. Now, just roll back the clock 30 years. What did the police do before CCTV?
What, less than 30 years? 10 years?
Yeah. They knocked on people's doors. They put out inquiries. They went round, spoke to their informants. I left us with a little A5 flyer. Oh, there's been an incident in the street. Did you see it? Why don't you knock on the door and ask? A week later. What goes it a week later?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you're a business, how can you afford to stay open when you've got scumbag thugs? All they want to do is steal from people like you and me and shopkeepers who pay our taxes, work hard to contribute to society, and these people contribute nothing. All they do is take from society, and the judiciary do nothing about it as well.
Yeah, I get it. I do sense, though, and I know you always think I defend the police, and thank you, Nigel, for your call, but I do sense that those decisions not to pursue certain lines of investigation, of course there's going to be the odd copper who's just not very good. That's in any walk of life. But I do think that comes from a higher pay grade than the Bobby on the beat. But that's Nigel in London. Max is in Cambridgeshire. What do you got for us, Max? Afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian.
Hello.
Yeah, I was just comparing how times have changed. When I left the army, I'd done a bit of security in Maidstone in Kent.
Yep.
And when someone had come running out of one of the shops, we'd chase them down and I'd drag them back to the shop, sometimes not too gently, and we'd wait for the police and they'd take them away. You know, whatever happened to those days?
Yeah, it's quite a simple equation, wasn't it, really?
Well, yeah, it worked.
Nobody ever sat around the dinner table that night and said, you won't believe what happened in Walworths. They took a thief away. I mean, that would be exactly what one might expect.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, I can just imagine how these security guards must feel today. Yeah. I mean, I'm nearly 62 now, but, you know, in my day, yeah, you'd sometimes you'd have a bit of a tussle. They'd want to put up a fight, but they usually give up when they realise, you know, usually those two puffed out to do anything by the time you caught them anyway.
True.
And, yeah, at least the shop got their goods back, and they never usually come back to the shop again, or that was banned anyway.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, it would be simple stuff. I don't know what's moved on from that. I mean, I think, yes, obviously there's been an issue with the amount of pressure the police are under for other forms of criminality that has taken precedence. But there's also something about the mentality of a thief, I guess, Max, or there's just more of them.
There is, yeah. Well, like you say, they just know they can get away with it now, and you know.
Well, there's nothing.
It's just gone too soft.
Yeah, there's nothing to worry yourself about, is there? Listen, Max, thank you very much indeed for that. Martin says, when you referred to a tax on retail staff, I had to do a double take. Listening on the radio, what I heard was a tax on retail staff, and immediately assumed that Rachel from accounts had devised yet another way of robbing hard-working people of their hard-earned cash. Says Martin. Well, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Today we're announcing a new tax on retail staff. How dare you work in retail? So you're going to be charged a special fee just for that job. Lots of comment as well. We'll talk more about electric cars in a second, the Chinese electric cars as well, because I said earlier, and it might have sounded quite naive, are there Chinese electric cars on our roads? And Jenny and others got in touch to say, yeah, we'll talk to Quentin Wilson on this. There's loads of them out there, but I don't think I've ever seen one, unless I've seen one and haven't realised. I'm going to see loads of them now, haven't I? Because that's how it kind of works. And are they as reliable as the other stuff? I'm obviously talking about the Teslas and the electric versions of all those other cars, the German and the Japanese models, BMWs, Audis, Nissans and the like, Toyota, all the usual stuff. But beyond that, What are the Chinese electric cars? If you drive one, I'd like to know more about it. Somebody did make a point, and I can't find where it is now, but apparently a lot of the Chinese ones go out on leasing. There's a big lease area in Chinese cars, and that's another one. Who hasn't had that conversation? Do I buy a car? Do I lease a car? Is it going to be better to lease a car? A car is an ongoing payment, isn't it? Forever, for the rest of your life. And people scratch their head when you say that. You go, what do you mean? Well, you've got it every 5 years or whatever it is, you've got to buy another one. So you've either got it on credit, so you've got a finance deal, in which case it's a monthly payment, probably for most of that 5 years, or you're going to buy it outright. And if you're going to buy it outright, fantastic, but in 5 years' time, you've got to buy it outright again. So you've got to save up the equivalent amount of money, i.e. monthly, to buy it outright. If you want a car, it's whatever way you slice it, unless you're mega rich, it's an ongoing payment. No, it's almost, whereas a mortgage at least comes to an end, but a car doesn't really, because it has to be replaced on a, not a regular basis, but a semi-regular basis. How long do you keep a car for? I mean, my little Aigo, my Toyota, which is the second car, piece of junk that it is, I've had that thing for about 6 years. And it passes its MOT every year. I think it's an official MOT place I take it to. I've got no idea, but I get a certificate at the end of it. Our Amy, who works here, she's got one of those cars as well. It runs like a dream, Amy, doesn't it? Nothing wrong with it at all. Costs about, to fill it up to the top, costs about only 40 quid, and it lasts for months. You can be in there, you very rarely visit a petrol station in one of those things. You don't need to. Oh, Faith as well, who's mixing for us today, she has one as well. We're like the Aigo. Is it Aigo or Aigo? Or Aigo? I never know. Anyway, it's that little kind of knob of a car, that thing. It's that. Yeah. I saw someone I knew today, okay? I saw a builder I knew as I was about to get in my car, and I nearly just kept on walking past it because he's going to see me get in it and go, do you drive that, mate? Sometimes you do. It is the second car, but I tell you what, it works like a beauty. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk with Quentin Wilson on electric cars in just a second. 3:30, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, if you're going to drive one of those little cars, it's got to be automatic, by the way. It's the only way forward. The only way forward. So Chinese vehicles, electric vehicles, are set to take a quarter of the British market by 2030. In many respects, that headline is of no surprise when you look at the might and the colossal nature of what is happening in China, the volumes of which they're able to build, engineer and then build and export are just like nowhere else on the planet, I guess. More than 400,000 are set to be on the road by the time the UK bans the sale of pure petrol and diesel cars. This is despite concerns over privacy and the quality of the vehicles. I think for a bit as well, there was a couple of months where I think Chinese electric cars overtook Teslas in America. So they're obviously, I think we can safely say they've made their mark. Let's speak with Quentin Wilson, former Top Gear presenter and motoring journalist. Quentin, good afternoon to you. I guess, you know, as I was just saying there, no real surprise that the Chinese are becoming rather dominant in this field.
Well, China's becoming a kind of electro state, isn't it? And they're really, really going forward with all this stuff while we've been sleeping for the last 10, 15 years. And they've got their latest version of the ChatGPT out. And the cars, Ian, you know, they're all right. I drove to Paris in a Skywell B11, and while it wasn't perhaps as refined and well finished as something like an Audi, it did the job. It got us there. It was fine, and it was a really pleasing drive. And you know, I've driven BYDs and your Tesla that comes out of Shanghai, and lots of them do. They're all right. I mean, I think it's too early to say whether they will be as reliable as we'd like, and I think the jury's still out until we see them really in mainstream service. But all the data and the touch and the feeling I've had with them, the interaction, shows that actually they're not bad.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be, as is the case with a lot of their technology, and certainly you mentioned that key word, electric. It's that, isn't it? People go, well, it's not great. It's all right, though. It's okay. I mean, it works, and doubtless, you know, where there are shortcomings, they will improve anyway.
They will, and they've learnt from us. I mean, you know, the Elon Musk with his deal with the Chinese government and Shanghai factory, they have learnt from him, and they've taken those learnings and they've managed to replicate the quality and the systems and you know, the really good interfaces, and come up with products which are working. And I drove a BYD Dolphin the other day. I couldn't really fault it, and it was 25 grand. So, you know, the surveys that we're seeing now, you've got this polarization between people under 40 who say, actually, yeah, look, I'd like that because it's going to have better interfaces, got better gadgets, it's kind of quite trendy, and they're happy, and they're not brand loyal, and they will change, and it'll be price and tech which sways them. Then you've got the people like you and me, the old boys, who sort of say, oh, what about the privacy and what about the spying and all this? And what we've got to remember is that, you know, we've been dealing with these phones and the chips in these from China, so it's probably a bit late to worry about all that security stuff.
But the price tag, as you rightly say, is almost always the overarching factor on these things, and what sees a brand or a particular model go from sort of zero to a huge proliferation on the roads. It is price, right? Every day of the week, that will be the guiding barometer of success.
It will, and if it brings prices generally of cars down in the UK, that has to be a good thing for consumers. I think the industry is worried, obviously, but then we don't have many EV car makers in the UK. I mean, they too have got factories in China, BMW, Mercedes, Mini, you know, they're all over there anyway. So what we need to do is to make sure that the quality and the value is there, and make sure that the security concerns are looked at and taken care of. And then, you know, make sure our industry isn't threatened. And I'd like to see Chinese car factories and battery factories built here. I mean, Rachel is talking about, you know, growth. Well, let's get them on board, and let's get some factories built here and increase GDP and jobs and productivity and all that sort of stuff, instead of shipping them over from China.
One of the problems, of course, according to some, is that they are spying on our every move, Quentin. Everything you do is being doctored. Apparently there's a little red book you get in the glove compartment. I don't know whether that's just an urban myth. And nonetheless, you are certainly playing to the Chinese government, and they're going to crunch our data and spy on us for the rest of time.
But Ian, they already are. If they're doing that with Alexa, this computer, my phone, etc., it's probably a bit late in the day to worry about that.
Yeah, I think you might be right, Quentin. Thank you as ever, Quentin Wilson, the motoring journalist and former Top Gear presenter with us on the programme. Thank you to him. That's, by the way, the second time Quentin's used the phrase "old boys like us" when talking to me. I'm just saying, nearly a 20-year difference in age. I'm just making that point. If you drive one and you've given it a go, I'm intrigued. Derek says, my son has an MG, saves him 2,000 quid in tax. If he needs a long run, he uses the company diesel van or sends a Minion instead. I didn't know MG was Chinese, is it? Has it always been? Did they buy it? What's the deal with that? I always thought I never really knew the roots, if you like, of MG in that respect. John's in Chesterfield. John, what have you got for us? Hi.
Well, Chris, your gentleman there, the ex-Top Gear guy, sort of stole my thunder, really. But I head up a leasing company. I've been on for 27 years, and I was going to say to you that MG is Chinese-owned, but you and I will remember MG for being the...
Well, quintessentially British, right?
Quite right, yes.
About as British, like Triumph, it was up there.
It's the budget end of the EV vehicle.
Got
and then the cars we were talking about, BYD Seal, that competes with Tesla.
Okay.
And nice car, actually. I tried one myself. I've had a Tesla, I've had a Polestar, and I've got a BMW electric, so I've been in one 4 years.
Got it.
Now, negatives. They're soulless.
You mean visually soulless, or in terms of their performance?
Well, the BMW drives like a petrol or diesel BMW. It's a great car because they build great cars.
Yep.
So it's refined, it never goes wrong, it's got all the right gadgetry, and it's a good car.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't drive like a petrol or diesel. They don't have that engine sound. So if you're a driver, if you're a man that wants a driver's car, they're not for you. But obviously we're all going to get forced down that route because the way the government is structuring the, BIK, the benefit in kind, and the road fund license. Although that's creeping up, Ian. I pay 2%, but in a few more years it's 9%, and then the first registration fee was 0, and it's going on cars over 40k. It's going up to sort of 400 plus. So they're gradually grabbing the tax back from EV, even though Millimad is sending us down that route. They're sneaking it up. They're sneaking the bits up.
Are they? So, do you think Chinese electric cars are likely to be like Fords? Will we end up just everybody will have one, a big one, a small one, whatever, because they will be the dominating exporter of those kind of vehicles?
Well, I hear they've got a volume brand they've created in China that they're going to push into the UK in big numbers at highly competitive prices, which is going to damage our core manufacturers, our people, our historic manufacturers.
Well, they're disruptors, aren't they, really? That's part of what they're doing, and they can afford, because of the government component to their, the way they do business, they can probably say, look, here's a car that ordinarily we would sell for 20 grand, it's on sale for 12, and you can see people going, do you know what, I'm going to buy it. You can almost hear that moment when everybody goes nuts to buy a 12 grand brand new electric car because of the price.
Exactly, and they're going to do that, and sadly, because of this shocking Labour leadership, instead of putting some sort of tariff on them, like America will do, or like Trump said he's going to do, we probably won't, because they're appalling, aren't they? They don't know what they're doing, they're letting the country down, they're letting you and I down, they're just a joke. So I think that they'll probably destroy the likes of... look at Vauxhall, when you look at them deeply, Vauxhall's half French-owned.
Yeah.
So they're not really true British brands. The Indians own Jaguar Land Rover.
And have done for a long time now, of course.
Hence why the car's so particularly unreliable.
Yeah.
But, it's slightly, I think, the car market is going to, and what people drive is going to look considerably different in 10 years. But thank God I'll have retired by then.
Well, there is that. But of course, China, as I mentioned, a lot of their stuff is state-owned, particularly, in the big manufacturing sphere, like cars. Quentin Wilson just said, John, that let's get their factories over here, get them building batteries in this country. Is that a good thing?
Brilliant point, because if we want to grow the economy, that's what we've got to do. But is Rachel Thieves and her cooperates, are they capable of doing that, Ian? I mean, I just don't think they are. I think we'll be in a very damaged place in 4 years if they last that long. Then we'll have to have a government that's going to have to try and put everything right they've put wrong.
Well, then that could take another 10 years, couldn't it? So something's going to happen. Yeah, we're beginning to feel sort of like the significance, and I don't mean this unkindly to Luxembourg, but it's beginning to feel that that's sort of who we are. A sort of low to middling country in terms of impact and significance. I know we've got lots of other things where we still punch above our weight in terms of, the financial industries and other industries, sciences and certainly the arts, and all of that is great. But there is a real feeling that, we're going southwards.
Well, exactly. We're selling our soul out to anybody that wants to put a tenner over the counter, and the country will be, it's morally bankrupt, and I think it's becoming financially bankrupt if the way we're going. If we don't get growth, and I fear we won't, what happens then? I mean, where do we go then with it's very worrying. I worry about it for my children, they're teenagers. I worry about, and I'm sure you've got children, and you worry about what the future lies for them, don't you, Ian?
100%, yeah.
And Ian, one last thing before I go.
Yeah.
I did some non-exec stuff for the NHS, and next time I call you, because I know you're out of time now, I will have to tell you about my experiences there, because it was scary.
I love that.
Scary.
Listen, that's what we would call in this industry a hook and tease, where you've given us the little headline of what's to come. I look forward to it, John. Can't wait to hear what happened when you did a bit of freelance work over there at the NHS. That's John in Chesterfield. Let's get a call on the electric dream from Luke in Bromley. How you doing, Luke?
Ian, I'm well, thank you. A few concerns about this electric cars. Listen, they look fun. They sound like, they're quiet. It's all quite nice.
Yeah.
But I do have concerns about if they're making them as well as they can right now, and we've got challenges, hesitancies over them. Imagine if they're making them in mass and obviously on a budget. The batteries are worse. The thing runs out quicker.
Well, that's the bit that worried me. I mean, if you go out and buy, I don't want to be stereotypical about Chinese stuff, because that's been the joke since you were at school, isn't it? Made in China, your shoes, whatever it happens to be. But is it true, could we be confident that whatever we think of Tesla, for example, that a Tesla battery is made of is exactly the same, or the Chinese battery is as good as a BMW or a Tesla? Probably not.
Listen, Tesla is like buying a Bentley right now. It's obviously made really well. It's all, looks great. The future ones are going to be like, like you say, Kias and KAs and all that stuff. They're going to be budget made. We already know that the roads can't cope with the weight of them, because obviously they're pushing the drains down things where they're attached to the tarmac. It can't cope with the weight.
Yeah.
Constantly of these heavy machines going over, which are twice as heavy as what they're designed for.
Yeah.
The brakes wear down much faster because the cars are much heavier. They have massive brakes, so it costs a lot to change the brakes, and that causes disintegration of the brake dust and all that stuff. And then we know that they cost more to buy unless you do make them budget, in which case they'll go quicker. So we're going to end up with scraps and the resale is really poor. I mean, I don't want to put them totally down, because I'm sure they've got some positives. But
I'm sure there are, and maybe in the fullness,
anxiety.
Yeah, maybe in the fullness of time, they'll be amazing. But I don't sense they're going to be amazing yet.
No, and to force people to use them is what is wrong. Listen, if you want to buy them, great. Some people if they've got money, they have one of each.
What do you drive, John?
Luke.
Sorry, Luke. John was our last caller. What do you drive, Luke?
Volvo XC40.
A what?
A Volvo XC40.
Oh, a Volvo, yeah.
Hybrid.
Fellow Volvo driver. Although I haven't quite crossed the Rubicon to the hybrid yet, but I certainly fancy it, because I'm told it works a dream.
It's beautiful. It's solid. It's a little bit more than the average car, but it's so much better. Before that, I had a brand new Mercedes E-Class, and it's better than that.
Good work. Nice to hear it. Luke, thank you. Luke in Bromley, not John in Chesterfield, who was our previous call. Thank you to him. Jeremy Carl's going to be here at 4. Before that, we'll have a chinwag to Jezza and find out what's going on his programme. More comment from you on the way. It's coming up on 10 to 4. This is Talk.
now have a playbook which we can adopt in this country. Donald Trump has set it out for us.
Right.
If France won't take these people back to France, which is where they came from, well, then we should impose sanctions on France. We remove all the fishing licenses for their boats that come into our water with our consent to take our fish.
Right.
Often killing a hell of a lot more than they need, abusing the environmental integrity of British waters.
Yeah.
So instead of paying the French the thick end of £1 billion, which is what we've done, take strong action.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Liam says, it's okay talking about electric cars, but how are we going to charge them? Can we charge them with Ed's ukulele? Maybe that's the ukulele power. David says, Chinese cars, if they're going to flood the market, then we must place tariffs on them to protect our industries. Or you embrace it, as Quentin Wilson said, and say, no, come over here, build them here. Build loads of them here, build your batteries here, create thousands of jobs. Oh, I'm not sure about that. Steve says, going from when Ian Collins was outed as a multi-billionaire on the internet, I bet Ian's main car is a Bugatti. In fact, all three of them are Bugattis. Let's go over here to Jason in Sheffield. Jason, how you doing? Retail crime, what have you got for us?
Well, what I've got for you is I don't think we should knock shoplifting.
We shouldn't knock shoplifting?
No. Do you know why?
Go on.
Because it's the only growth industry left in 2025 UK.
Yeah. But no one's gaining out of it other than the tea leaves, are they?
No, it's the only growth industry. There's nothing else left. The thing is, it will come down anyway because all the shops are closed anyway, and they're going to have to close because the insurance companies will be unwilling to insure these shops because it's too risky.
Yeah. I think go on.
The third point is it's only a matter of time before the gangs start a protection racket as they did in Chicago, New York and London back in the day.
Yeah, we won't rob you as long as you pay us, a couple of hundred quid a week.
You pay me 250 quid a week.
Yeah, we'll make sure nobody shoplifts you.
Burgles you, shoplifts you, yeah.
Well, do you know what? I reckon there's probably places where that is already going on, to be honest. Listen, thank you, Jason. You get Caller of the Week. Jason in Sheffield. This is Mary, who's in Cyprus. Was it that bad over here? You legged it to Cyprus, Mary?
Yes, when Tony Blair was on, we couldn't stand it any longer.
So you did it. You got what you were pre-Kia as well. You saw this coming. You saw this coming decades ago.
Yes, that's right. Like Enoch Powell.
Yeah, I like the fact that you were on it. So what are your thoughts on immigration then, Mary? 'Cause I suppose you are an immigrant, aren't you?
Well, yes, it's brilliant here. We've been here 25 years. It's lovely.
Yeah, nice.
We love it. We love it.
Yeah.
But why I'm calling, many moons ago, my oldest son had a temporary job, and he was working in an office in Oxford.
Yeah.
Where they were giving out all sorts of stuff to immigrants. And one day a couple went in for clothes vouchers. So he gave them the allocated clothes vouchers, and off they went. They came back the next day and said, could you change these, please? We don't like the clothes in this shop. Could we have Marks and Spencer's ones?
You see, the thing is, however critical we might be of that, I'd have probably done the same thing, to be honest. Mary, who doesn't like a pair of M&S socks?
But my son, he was quite young at the time, and he was having to buy his own clothes. He was very envious of the...
Yeah, to be in that position. Here's a voucher. No, not one for... We don't really want a Peacock's voucher. We'd rather have M&S.
Yes.
If Peacocks are still going.
So life hasn't hasn't changed very much.
It's just, yeah, indeed. It's the same script, just different players. Mary, good luck with everything. Thank you. Enjoy the rays in Cyprus. I know it's not belting summer or anything there, but, you know, I'm sure it's a lot better than it is here. It was absolutely freezing today. Cliff in Berkshire says the wholesale change of vehicle manufacturing in this country happened before the 1970s. Our industry was destroyed when Japanese flooded the markets with cheap cars and motorcycles. So this wasn't this was the Japanese. The only difference this time is that the government has mandated it with their climate agenda. We can't build them here because power is too expensive to compete. That's very true. And really interesting point, Cliff, that you make about things that happen. You know, Margaret, all roads lead to Thatcher. If you want to talk about the destruction of manufacturing and stuff like that, all roads lead to Thatcher. And of course, if you can be bothered to take just a vaguely intelligent dip into the story of British retail. And I'm talking about, you know, clothing, cotton mills of Lancashire and goodness knows where else. You'll discover that stuff was on walkabout way before Mrs. Thatcher ever came to power. The Far East was doing its thing before 1979, and it came to a head, of course. She acknowledged that there's industries here that ain't doing a bean, and she wouldn't have got everything right, but certainly the idea that it all fell on her lap was not true, and I think Cliff identifies some of that with cars. One here from David, electric cars, it's all about the infrastructure and the time to replenish the batteries. Price are secondary considerations. Well, it should be. I mean, you want, but I fear that the Chinese will just come up with an amazing electric car and they'll go, look, here comes the new, whatever you want to call it. It's amazing. It looks a bit like a small Audi, like an A1 or something, and it'll cost you 12 grand, brand new. And people won't be necessarily looking, as they should, at the batteries and all the other bits. They'll be looking at the price and go, look, I've got a brand new car. It looks a bit tasty as well. It's got everything going on. What could be wrong with it? Well, there might be nothing. There might be everything. We're done. Well, we're done here. But talk is not, because coming up on the other side of the news, Peter Cardwell is back with us, looking fine and gorgeous as ever. Obviously, I slightly exaggerate the second point.
Ever so slightly.
Only a little bit.
Well, indeed. Well, one person who will be contributing to the programme is we're expecting to hear a press conference from President Trump after that horrendous plane crash in America with so many people dead. He should be speaking in the next few minutes. We hope to bring that to you live. We'll also talk about the price and the impact of shoplifting, how incredibly widespread it is. I know that's been a big topic today. So many people letting us know about their experiences. I want to hear from more people as well. Also, the more Israeli hostages who've been held by Hamas terrorists have been released, and we'll be speaking to the brother of someone who is still held. And in fact, tomorrow we'll be speaking to someone the cousin of someone who's just been released as well. So there's a lot within that as well. We'll talk to Harry Cole as well from The Sun about all the big political stories as well.
You used to work in government.
Yeah.
You were a SPAD, as we call it, a special advisor. Yeah. Did you ever, and I was asking one of Boris's special advisors a little while ago, the same thing. When you're in a room coming up with ideas and sort of crunching the numbers, did anybody just go, this is bonkers, it just doesn't make sense? Why not do this and do this instead?